A tooth lies half buried in a slope of gray sandstone. It is not polished. It is not clean. Its enamel is cracked by pressure and time, and one edge still carries the tiny serrations that once moved through muscle and hide. Around it, the badlands are dry, wind-cut, and open to the sky, but the rock that holds it was once wet ground, part of a low coastal plain where rivers wandered east toward a shallow inland sea. The tooth is heavy for its size. It does not look delicate, the way many predatory dinosaur teeth do. It is thick from front to back, shaped less like a knife and more like a reinforced spike with cutting edges. If you turn it in your hand, the shape tells you something before any museum label does. This was not the tooth of an animal built only to slice. It belonged to a predator that could close its jaws and drive its teeth into bone. That is where Tyrannosaurus rex begins for us. Not as a roar, not as a silhouette in lightning. It begins as bone and enamel, as a broken crown weathering from stone, as a fragment of an animal whose life was far stranger, more physical, and more complicated than the legend that grew around it. Tyrannosaurus rex lived near the very end of the Cretaceous period, in western North America, in a world of broad rivers, humid forests, fern-covered banks, flowering plants, conifers, turtles, crocodile relatives, small mammals, pterosaurs, birds, horned dinosaurs, duckbills, armored bodies, and mud that could hold a footprint long enough for burial to turn it into evidence. It was not alone in an empty landscape. It moved through one of the last great dinosaur ecosystems on Earth. If these journeys into the dinosaur age are why you return to Jurassical, subscribing keeps the next one close. The name Tyrannosaurus rex has become almost too familiar. It is printed on children's books, museum signs, toys, film posters, school notebooks, and the side of plastic skeletons. Familiarity can make an animal feel simple. It can reduce a living body into a shape: big head, small arms, huge teeth, long tail. But a fossil animal is not an icon first. It was an animal first. It breathed, grew, listened, smelled, fed, limped, healed, aged, and died in a landscape that no longer exists. Adult T-Rex was among the largest land predators known from the fossil record. Many adults reached around 12 meters in length, and the heaviest known individuals were animals of several tons, with skulls longer than a person is tall. The head was not just large, it dominated the body plan. The neck was powerful. The torso was deep. The hind limbs were enormous. The tail balanced the animal like a living counterweight. Every part of the skeleton seems arranged around the problem of carrying a massive skull and bringing it to bear on prey. The skull is the center of the story. Because the skull is where so much of T-Rex lived. It is where the senses gathered information from the world. It is where the jaws transformed that information into action. It is where stress fractures, healed wounds, tooth sockets, sinuses, and the cavities that once held nerves and blood vessels still preserve traces of behavior. A T-Rex skull is not just a weapon, it is a map of the animal's life. The rocks that preserve Tyrannosaurus rex are mostly latest Cretaceous deposits of North America, including the Hell Creek Formation of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming, as well as related formations farther north and south. These rocks date to the final, few million years before the asteroid impact that ended the age of non-avian dinosaurs. In them T-Rex appears with Triceratops, Edmontosaurus, Ankylosaurus, Thescelosaurus, Pachycephalosaurs, turtles, fish, frogs, crocodile relatives, birds, mammals, and plants that show a warm, lowland world near the western interior seaway. That setting matters. T-Rex was not a desert monster wandering a barren plain. The Hell Creek world held rivers wide enough to shift channels, floodplains that turned to mud after rain, swampy pockets where water stood between tree roots, and drier levees where plants grew thick along the banks. Leaves fell into ponds, logs drifted in floods, carcasses settled into sediment, tracks crossed wet surfaces, and disappeared beneath the next layer of silt. Above the floodplain, the air was warmer than most temperate landscapes today. There were no cities, no grasses spreading like modern prairies, no human lights on the horizon. Flowering plants had already become important by the Late Cretaceous, so this was not the strange gymnosperm world of the Jurassic. It had broad leaves, vines, shrubs, palms and palm-like plants in some places, conifers, ferns, and wet understory growth. It was green in ways that would feel partly familiar and partly wrong. A morning in that world might begin with insects moving across leaves and small mammals retreating into cover before daylight strengthened. A crocodile relative might rest half submerged in a channel. A soft-shell turtle might push through cloudy water. Farther back from the river, a herd of Edmontosaurus could tear vegetation with broad beaks, their bodies moving between trunks and low branches. Beyond them, a triceratops might stand with its head lowered, horns forward, frill catching the light. Then, the forest edge changes. Birds lift from branches. A smaller dinosaur stops moving. The sound is not a cinematic roar. It is the weight of steps in damp ground, the brush of a body against leaves, the slow pressure of something large enough that every other animal nearby must account for it. Rex enters the scene not because it wants drama, but because it is hungry. And hunger is the most ordinary force in the history of life. The animal that became the ultimate predator did not appear from nowhere. Tyrannosaurs began as much smaller theropods, animals that lived in the shadow of other predators for much of their early history. The great tyrant body plan, huge skull, deep jaws, reduced forelimbs, massive hind limbs, and strong senses, was assembled over many millions of years. For a long time, tyrannosaurs were not the largest hunters in their ecosystems. They were waiting inside evolution, though of course no animal knows it is waiting. Early tyrannosauroids were often modest in size. Some were long-legged hunters with lighter skulls and more useful forelimbs than their later relatives. Many had feathers, or feather-like coverings, at least in some lineages. Their history crossed Asia and North America, shaped by shifting sea levels, land bridges, climates, and competition with other carnivorous dinosaurs. The final rise of tyrannosaurids came late, when ecosystems changed and other large predators declined, leaving space for a new kind of apex hunter. The T-Rex body plan was not simply a larger version of every earlier tyrannosaur. It was a change in emphasis. The skull became deeper and broader, the teeth became thicker, the bite became more punishing, the arms became very small compared with the body. The legs remained powerful, though adult T-Rex was not built like a lightweight sprinter. It was a large animal carrying a heavy head, adapted not for fantasy speed, but for strength, efficiency, sensory precision, and devastating contact. A full-grown T-Rex did not need to chase everything over long distances. Its world contained large herbivores that could not vanish into burrows or climb trees. It could stalk, approach from cover, use terrain, follow scent, investigate carcasses, and target the vulnerable. Hunting is rarely the clean contest imagined in art. It is often waiting, testing, missing, returning, choosing the wrong moment, then finding one animal that is young, injured, distracted, trapped, sick, or too slow to respond. Before any of that, though, there was an egg. No confirmed T-Rex nest has been found, and no one can describe its nesting behavior with certainty. But T-Rex was a theropod dinosaur, and living theropods are birds, so reproduction belongs within a broader dinosaur pattern. Eggs were laid. Embryos developed inside shells. Hatchlings emerged small compared with the adults that made them. Somewhere in the Cretaceous landscape, a young tyrannosaur began as a fragile body under the cover of vegetation, sediment, or parental attention we cannot yet prove. Imagine a hatchling not much longer than a human arm, though no complete hatchling T-Rex skeleton has been found to settle the image. Its bones would have been light. Its head would not yet carry the deep architecture of the adult's skull. Its teeth would be small, sharp, and suited to prey very different from an adult's. The animal that would one day crush bone began life in a world where almost everything could injure it. A young T-Rex would not have been an apex predator. It would have been part of the small animal world of the floodplain. It may have hunted lizards, small mammals, baby dinosaurs, insects, amphibians, and scraps from carcasses. It would have moved through low vegetation, not towering above it. Rain would have mattered. Cold nights would have mattered. A larger theropod, a crocodile relative, an adult tyrannosaur, or even a defensive herbivore could have ended its life long before it approached adult size. Growth was one of the most important parts of the T-Rex story. Studies of fossil bone microstructure have shown that tyrannosaurs changed dramatically as they aged. They were not simply small adults that became larger. Their bodies shifted in proportion. Juveniles were likely more slender and long-legged, with narrower skulls and teeth that functioned more like slicing blades. Adults became heavier, deeper-skulled, and more bone-crushing. In one lifetime, the animal may have occupied different predatory roles. This matters because an ecosystem with T-Rex was not only an ecosystem with adults. It included younger tyrannosaurs moving differently, feeding differently, and selecting different prey. A teenage T-Rex may have been more agile than a fully mature individual, better suited to chasing smaller or quicker animals. The adult, with its enormous skull and punishing bite, could exploit prey and carcasses in ways the younger animal could not. Growth created an internal division of labor across age. That picture has become more complicated because some small tyrannosaur fossils once treated by many researchers as juvenile T-Rex have been argued in recent studies to represent Nanotyrannus, a separate smaller tyrannosaur living alongside T-Rex. The debate has shifted as new material has been studied, and it affects how scientists reconstruct juvenile T-Rex anatomy. The careful answer is not to pretend the uncertainty is gone, but to separate what the bones clearly show from what remains under argument. Even with that caution, T-Rex itself had to grow through vulnerable stages. No adult appears without years of survival behind it. A young tyrannosaur had to find food without being killed, had to avoid the feet and horns of herbivores, had to survive floods, droughts, injury, parasites, disease, and competition. The famous adult skeletons in museums are the rare survivors of an enormous filtering process. For every individual that reached maturity, many others likely disappeared without leaving a trace. Bone preserves some of that struggle. Growth rings inside fossil bones can record annual changes, like a rough biological calendar. They show periods of faster and slower growth, the body responding to age, food, health, and environment. A T-Rex was not assembled smoothly. It passed through seasons. Some years may have been abundant, with prey and carcasses easy to find. Other years may have been lean, with the animal growing less as the floodplain shifted around it. At a certain point in adolescence, T-Rex began to change quickly. The skull deepened. The jaw muscles expanded. The body gained mass at a remarkable pace. The animal that once moved as a lighter hunter became something heavier and more dangerous. This transformation would have altered its relationship with every animal around it. Prey that had once been too large became possible. Rival predators that once posed a threat became competitors. The floodplain itself became smaller beneath its feet. A subadult T-Rex entering this phase may have been one of the most dangerous animals in its ecosystem. It was not yet burdened with the full weight of old adulthood, but it had already gained size and power beyond most predators. Its legs could cover ground, its senses could locate opportunity, its bite was strengthening. It was learning the landscape through repeated failure and occasional success. The senses of T-Rex deserve as much attention as the teeth. A predator does not survive by weapons alone. It survives by finding things before they find it, by recognizing opportunity, by reading wind, sound, shape, movement, and the hidden messages carried through a landscape. The skull of T-Rex shows large olfactory regions, suggesting a strong sense of smell. It was likely able to detect carrion from a distance and follow scent trails through forest and floodplain. Smell would have connected T-Rex to parts of the world no human standing beside it could perceive. A carcass beyond a ridge. A wounded animal moving through trees. A nesting area. Another tyrannosaur. A riverbank where blood had mixed with mud. In a warm environment, scent changes quickly, carried by wind and broken by humidity, rain, and vegetation. A strong nose would not make hunting effortless, but it would widen the map of possibility. Vision was important too. The forward-facing eyes of T-Rex gave it overlapping fields of view, useful for depth perception. This does not mean it saw the world like a human, or that every detail of its vision can be reconstructed with confidence, but the skull does not support the old idea of a predator that could only notice moving objects. A large active animal with binocular vision, strong smell, and a powerful brain case was not easy to fool by standing still. Hearing may also have been tuned to low frequencies. The inner ear of tyrannosaurs suggests sensitivity to sounds useful for a large animal moving through a complex environment. Low sounds travel through vegetation and across open ground. Footsteps, calls, splashing water, bodies moving through brush, and the distant activity of other large animals could all matter. T-Rex lived in a world full of information, and much of its success came from reading that information. The popular image of T-Rex often begins too late, at the attack. The real animal's life was mostly not attacking. It was walking. It was resting. It was following scent. It was drinking. It was avoiding heat. It was investigating noises. It was replacing teeth, healing wounds, shedding old tissue, digesting food, and deciding whether a movement in the trees was worth the energy of pursuit. Predators spend much of their lives conserving effort because effort is expensive. To understand T-Rex, you have to watch its feet as much as its jaws. Each foot had 3 main weight-bearing toes, ending in claws that pressed into soil, sand, or mud. The foot was not flat like a human's. It was part of a bird-like hind limb system, with long bones arranged to carry weight efficiently. A track, if preserved, would be more than a footprint. It would be a record of mass, motion, and the ground's response. Very few trackways can be confidently assigned to T-Rex, but tyrannosaur tracks show the presence of large 3-toed predators moving through Cretaceous sediment. A single print can hold the outline of toes, pads, claw tips, and sometimes skin texture if conditions are exceptional. It can show where the animal stepped, but not why. The rest must be built from anatomy, comparison, sediment, and caution. T-Rex was not the impossible sprinter of older imagination. Biomechanical studies have debated its top speed for decades, but the broad picture is restrained. A full-grown adult could move effectively, probably with strong walking and perhaps faster gaits when necessary, but its immense body imposed limits. Running at very high speeds would have placed enormous stress on bones and muscles. The danger in an adult T-Rex was not that it behaved like a cheetah. It was that it did not need to. A 12-meter predator moving at a steady walk can still cover distance. It can follow a herd. It can arrive at a carcass. It can approach a river crossing. It can wait near a game trail. It can use the cover of trees, uneven ground, or the distraction of other animals. Speed matters in predation, but it is only one tool. Size, endurance, timing, surprise, and the ability to inflict catastrophic injury matter just as much. The tail was part of that movement. It was not a dragging rope, as old reconstructions once showed. It extended behind the body, lifted clear of the ground, balancing the heavy torso and skull. Muscles at the base of the tail connected to the hind limbs and helped power the stride. In life, the tail would have moved subtly with each step, part of a whole body system that made such a massive biped possible. The arms remain one of the most famous jokes in paleontology, but the joke can get in the way of the animal. T. Rex arms were very short relative to the body, but they were not necessarily weak. The bones show large muscle attachments, and each hand carried 2 clawed fingers. They could not reach the mouth. They could not grasp prey at a distance. But they may have helped during rising from rest, close contact, mating, or holding material near the chest. Their exact function remains debated. Evolution does not keep every structure because it impresses us. Sometimes a feature is reduced because another system has taken over its role. In T. rex, the skull became the primary tool of predation. The jaws did what the hands did in many other theropods. As the head grew more powerful, the forelimbs became less central to feeding and killing. The arms were not useless simply because they were small. They were small because the animal's body plan had changed around the skull. The skull itself was not a solid block. It was full of openings, chambers, sinuses, and struts. These reduced weight while maintaining strength, and they housed soft tissues that are gone now. The snout was broad. The back of the skull was wide, providing room for jaw muscles. The teeth were set in deep sockets. The lower jaw was strong, but the skull also had subtle flexibility, allowing it to handle stress when biting into struggling prey or dense bone. The bite of T. rex was extraordinary. Modern estimates vary by method and specimen, but the strongest adults likely produced bite forces of many thousands of pounds, enough to fracture bone. The teeth were not flat blades like those of many earlier theropods. They were thick, conical, and serrated, built to withstand high forces. When they entered bone, they did not simply cut. They crushed, punctured, and drove inward. This ability gave T. rex access to food other predators could not use as easily. Bone contains marrow, minerals, and tissue. Crushing it opens resources locked away from animals with weaker bites. Fossil bones bearing tyrannosaur bite marks show punctures, scores, and broken surfaces that match a predator capable of extreme feeding forces. T. rex could eat deeply into a carcass, not just strip the outside and leave the rest. That does not settle the old question of predator or scavenger, because the question is too narrow. Living large carnivores do both when they can. Lions scavenge. Hyenas hunt. Bears steal carcasses and kill prey. Crocodiles ambush and feed on the dead. A T. rex with a strong nose, crushing jaws, and enormous energy needs would not ignore carrion. But the evidence also supports active predation. Healed bite injuries in prey animals show that some victims survived attacks by large tyrannosaurs. One of the clearest pieces of evidence comes from a hadrosaur tail vertebra with a tyrannosaur tooth crown embedded in it, surrounded by healed bone. The prey animal lived after the bite. That means the bite was delivered to a living animal, not just a carcass. Other fossils show tyrannosaur feeding traces on Triceratops and other dinosaurs. Some marks may come from scavenging. Some may come from attacks. Together, they show a predator that used every opportunity available. A hunt involving T. rex would not need to be theatrical to be violent. A bite to the flank, tail, hip, or neck could leave deep wounds. A duckbill pulled off balance could fall beneath the weight of its own body. A juvenile Triceratops separated from cover could be vulnerable. An old or sick adult might hold its ground until blood loss, exhaustion, or infection did what impact alone could not. Triceratops was not passive prey. It carried a massive skull, a strong beak, horns over the eyes, a shorter nasal horn, and a body built low and powerful. A face-to-face encounter between a mature Triceratops and a mature T. rex would have been dangerous for both animals. The horns were real structures attached to living bone, covered in keratin, moved by neck muscles, and backed by tons of mass. A careless predator could be gored, knocked sideways, or injured badly enough to starve later. Predation is not only about the moment of contact, it is about risk. A broken leg is a death sentence for many large predators. An infected wound can end a life slowly. A horn through muscle, a kick to the jaw, a fall in deep mud, a bite from another tyrannosaur, all of these could change the animal's future. T. Rex was powerful, but power did not make it invulnerable. Edmontosaurus offered a different kind of challenge. It was large, abundant in many late Cretaceous ecosystems, and capable of moving on 4 limbs or rising onto 2. Its skull was not armed with horns, but its body was strong, and adults could be formidable through sheer size. A herd of duckbills could create confusion, noise, and movement. Young individuals would be more vulnerable, especially near river crossings, in dense vegetation, or when separated from adults. Ankylosaurus belonged to another category altogether. It was not fast, but it was built like a living fortress, with armor embedded in the skin and a tail club capable of delivering damaging blows. An adult Ankylosaurus would have been a poor choice for any predator, unless the circumstances were unusual. T. Rex may have fed on ankylosaur carcasses and perhaps attacked vulnerable individuals, but the armor and club were not decorative. They were consequences of living near predators with jaws like industrial tools. The Hell Creek predator did not control the ecosystem by constant combat. It controlled it by presence. Every herbivore larger than a dog lived under the possibility of tyrannosaur attention. Every carcass large enough to smell from a distance could attract it. Every riverbank where animals gathered to drink could become a place of risk. The ultimate predator is not the animal that fights the most. It is the animal around which other animals must organize caution. Look at a T-Rex tooth under magnification, and the edge becomes a saw of tiny denticles. Each denticle has its own shape, its own wear, its own place in the cutting surface. Some teeth show broken tips. Some show repairs in the jaw where infection or stress affected bone. Teeth were replaced throughout life, new crowns developing below or behind old ones. A T-Rex carried a changing mouth, a rotating toolkit renewed by growth. Tooth replacement mattered because the mouth took punishment. Biting into bone damages teeth, feeding on carcasses, striking struggling animals, pulling against resistant tissue, and contacting horn, beak, armor, or stone could chip or break crowns. Fossil teeth found alone are common partly because theropods shed them. A single lost tooth in a river deposit might mark a feeding event, a passing animal, a carcass site, or nothing more dramatic than a predator losing part of its mouth into mud. Fossil evidence is often like that. It offers certainty in small pieces and uncertainty in the spaces between them. A tooth mark can show contact. A healed wound can show survival. A track can show movement. A bone bed can show death and burial. But behavior must be reconstructed from patterns, not imagined too confidently from one specimen. The best T-Rex is not the loudest one. It is the one that remains tied to the evidence. Some of the most famous T-Rex skeletons have names because people need handles for individuals. Sue, Stan, Scotty, the nation's T-Rex, each is not just a display animal, but a record of one body. Some preserve injuries. Some preserve pathologies. Some preserve proportions that influence size estimates. Their bones show that T-Rex individuals varied, grew, suffered, and died in different ways. A species is not a single perfect skeleton. It is a population of imperfect lives. In a museum hall, a T-Rex skeleton can appear suspended outside time. The bones are clean, the posture is arranged, the lighting is controlled. Children stand beneath the ribs and look up. But each bone once sat inside a body surrounded by heat, blood, nerves, muscle, fat, connective tissue, and skin. The skeleton is what remains after the animal has been stripped down by death, burial, chemistry, preparation, and display. The living animal would have looked heavier than many skeletal mounts suggest. Muscles filled the thighs, the neck carried deep tissue. The skull was covered in skin, scales, keratin, and sensitive surfaces. The lips question remains debated among theropod researchers, and reconstructions differ in how much of the teeth would have been exposed when the mouth was closed. What is clear is that the living head was not bare bone. It was a biological surface, with texture, color, blood flow, and sensation. Skin impressions from tyrannosaurids and related animals suggest scales on at least parts of the body in large tyrannosaurs, while earlier tyrannosauroids show that feather-like coverings existed in the broader lineage. Whether adult T. rex carried feathers over much of its body, only patches, or very little remains debated. A cautious reconstruction can allow scaly regions and the possibility of limited filamentous covering, especially in younger animals, without pretending the evidence is complete. Color is even harder. Fossils rarely preserve pigment evidence for animals like T. rex, and no one can state with confidence whether it was brown, gray, mottled, striped, dark-backed, pale-bellied, or marked with display colors around the face. Modern large predators are not randomly colored. Their patterns relate to habitat, age, sex, display, camouflage, and communication. T. rex may have been visually complex in ways the bones cannot show. Stand near a living adult in the forest, and the first impression might not be teeth. It might be mass, a body high enough to look over low trees, a skull moving between branches, breath pushing through nostrils, feet pressing into wet soil with a sound too low and ordinary to feel like legend. The animal would smell of blood, water, mud, skin, and digestion. It would not exist for your imagination. It would simply exist. A predator this large needed territory, though the exact size of a T. rex range is unknowable. It would have moved through areas defined by food, water, cover, seasonal conditions, other tyrannosaurs, and the distribution of herbivores. Floodplains are not static. Channels shift. Banks collapse. Forest patches open after storms. Fires may clear ground. Drought may concentrate animals near remaining water. Each change creates new routes and new risks. The Western Interior Seaway lay to the east of many T. rex habitats, a broad inland sea that had once divided North America and was retreating by the end of the Cretaceous. Its shoreline, coastal plains, and river systems shaped the world of Hell Creek and related formations. The land was low in many areas, cut by waterways that deposited mudstone, sandstone, silt, and organic-rich layers. These sediments are why we have so much of the ecosystem at all. A flood could erase a week of tracks in one afternoon. Rain might soften a bank until a hadrosaur left deep prints that filled with silt. A carcass might bloat in heat, drift against a logjam, then settle into a channel where scavengers fed until sediment covered what remained. Bones could be scattered by water, trampled by animals, gnawed by predators, split by drying, or buried quickly enough to survive. Fossilization was never guaranteed. It was always an accident with strict conditions. Most T. rex individuals left nothing. No tooth, no toe bone, no skull, no trace at all. They hatched, moved, fed, grew or failed to grow, and vanished into the recycling of the floodplain. The ones we know are the exceptions, preserved because death happened in the right place, followed by the right burial, followed by millions of years of survival inside rock, followed by erosion, discovery, collection, and study. The first scientific discovery of T. rex belongs to the early 20th century when Barnum Brown of the American Museum of Natural History collected fossils in Montana. In 1905, Henry Fairfield Osborn named Tyrannosaurus rex, giving the animal a name that means tyrant lizard king. The name has carried immense cultural weight, but at the time it was attached to incomplete bones emerging from a Western landscape where paleontology was still learning what the last Cretaceous ecosystems contained. Imagine the labor of those early excavations. Rock removed by hand, plaster jackets wrapped around heavy bones, wagons, rail transport, field notes, dust, heat, and uncertainty. A skull did not rise from the ground ready for display. It came out as fragments, blocks, and problems. Preparation took patience. Interpretation took even longer. Every mount in a museum carries that hidden labor in its posture. Since then, T. rex has become one of the most studied dinosaurs in the world. Its bones have been scanned, measured, compared, modeled, sliced microscopically when possible, and debated in papers, museum labs, classrooms, and public halls. It has become familiar not because everything about it is known, but because the animal sits at the meeting point of good fossil evidence, extreme anatomy, public fascination, and genuine scientific uncertainty. The number of known specimens is large by the standards of giant predatory dinosaurs, but still tiny compared with the number of individuals that once lived. One population estimate suggested that billions of T. rex may have existed over the full duration of the species, with only a minute fraction preserved and recovered. The exact number is uncertain, dependent on assumptions about range, density, body mass, and species duration, but the lesson is clear. The fossil record is a narrow window, not the whole landscape. That narrowness should make the animal more interesting, not less. Every skeleton is a survivor twice over, first in life, then in stone. A broken rib can suggest trauma. A worn tooth can suggest feeding. A fused bone can suggest age. A puncture can suggest conflict. A healed infection can suggest endurance. Fossils do not bring back the animal, but they do let us meet the physical consequences of its life. Violence appears in tyrannosaur bones not only through prey. T. rex individuals sometimes show injuries consistent with bites to the face. Large predators often fight their own kind. Crocodiles, big cats, wolves, bears, and birds all carry social conflict in their bodies. Tyrannosaurs may have bitten each other during competition over carcasses, mates, territory, dominance, or encounters we cannot classify. The marks do not need a dramatic story. They show that other T. rex were among the dangers of being T. rex. A face bite between tyrannosaurs would have been serious. The jaws that could open bone in a carcass could damage another predator's snout, jaw, or skull. Yet healed injuries show that some animals survived. Survival after injury matters because it reveals resilience. A wounded T. rex had to keep feeding. It had to move with pain, avoid further conflict, and heal while still meeting the demands of a giant carnivore's body. Disease also appears in some specimens. The famous Sioux skeleton shows evidence of injuries and pathologies, including damaged ribs, limb problems, and lesions in the jaw region that have been interpreted in different ways, including infection. Paleopathology is difficult because bones record only certain kinds of illness and trauma. Soft tissue disease usually vanishes, but where bone reacts, it leaves a record of stress inside the life of an individual. A sick T. rex would not look like a monster. It would look like an animal conserving energy, standing in shade, moving less, feeding at a carcass rather than hunting, favoring one leg, holding the head differently if the jaw hurt. The line between apex predator and vulnerable body is thin. The same teeth that made T. rex feared could become infected. The same mass that made it powerful could make injury costly. Hunger would push it anyway. A large adult needed huge amounts of food over time, though not every day in equal measure. Like modern large carnivores, it may have fed heavily when a carcass was available, then gone days without a major meal. A successful kill or scavenged hadrosaur could feed more than one animal, at least if the first arrival tolerated others or was eventually displaced. Feeding sites may have been noisy, tense, and dangerous. Picture a carcass on a riverbank. The body is an Edmontosaurus, already opened by heat and smaller scavengers. Flies gather. Crocodile relatives approach from water. Small theropods dart in and retreat. A young tyrannosaur tears at softer tissue. Then, an adult arrives, and the feeding changes. The skull lowers. Teeth sink into ribs or hip. Bone cracks. Other animals withdraw or circle. The adult is not performing dominance, it is using anatomy. Bone crushing is not wasteful when the animal has the equipment for it. Mammalian carnivores such as hyenas are famous for processing bone, but T. rex achieved a similar ecological result with a very different skull and tooth system. Its teeth endured high pressures, its jaws produced high forces, its neck helped pull and reposition material. The result was a predator and scavenger able to reduce carcasses more completely than many competitors. This may explain some of its success. An apex predator is not only defined by what it can kill, it is also defined by what it can eat. If T-Rex could extract marrow, minerals, and deep tissue from carcasses that other animals could not fully exploit, then each carcass became more valuable. A dead Triceratops was not just meat. It was a storehouse of resources locked inside a skeleton. Triceratops was one of the most common large herbivores in many Hell Creek deposits, and that abundance placed it at the center of T-Rex life. The relationship between the two animals was not a single duel repeated across time. It was a long ecological pressure. Young Triceratops would have been vulnerable. Adults were dangerous. Carcasses were valuable. Horns, frills, beaks, and tyrannosaur teeth met in life, in death, and in the fossil record. A Triceratops skull could be as much a landscape as an object. The brow horns swept above the face. The frill extended backward, sometimes damaged, sometimes healed, sometimes marked. The beak cropped plants close to the ground. The neck muscles that carried the head were powerful. If a T-Rex approached a healthy adult from the front, it faced a wall of bone and keratin. Predators prefer advantage. They do not seek fairness. An attack from behind or the side would make more sense. A bite to the pelvis, tail base, hind limb, or flank might wound and weaken. A predator could test, withdraw, follow, and return. A large herbivore might stand, turn, charge, or retreat into vegetation. We should not imagine every encounter ending in a kill. Most predatory attempts in the modern world fail. Failure leaves fewer fossils than success, but it shaped behavior just as strongly. Edmontosaurus may have been more frequent prey in some contexts because its defenses were different. Bite marks on hadrosaur bones, including healed injuries, show that tyrannosaurs interacted with living duckbills. A hadrosaur tail struck by a T-Rex bite could survive, but the wound would have mattered. Pain, infection, altered movement, and vulnerability to future attacks would follow. A healed fossil does not show an easy escape. It shows that the animal lived long enough for bone to respond. These prey animals had their own lives beyond being food. Edmontosaurus fed, migrated or moved locally, nested, communicated, grew, and died. Triceratops competed, displayed, defended, and browsed through low vegetation. Ankylosaurus moved through the same plant communities, armored from head to tail. Thescelosaurus, pachycephalosaurs, ornithomimids, small theropods, and birds filled the spaces between the giants. T-Rex lived inside their world, not above it. A river crossing could bring many of them together. The bank is trampled. The mud is churned. Hadrosaurs move down first, pushing through reeds and young trees. A turtle slides from a log. Crocodile eyes hold at the waterline. A Triceratops waits, then steps into the shallows. Somewhere downwind, a tyrannosaur lifts its head. The scene is ordinary until it is not. The landscape itself gave and removed opportunities. After heavy rain, mud could trap smaller animals or slow larger ones. During drought, shrinking water sources concentrated prey and predator alike. Seasonal changes in plant growth shifted herbivore movement. Floods could kill animals directly, isolate juveniles, or expose carcasses. The ultimate predator was still bound to weather. It hunted within geology, climate, and chance. There were sounds in the Hell Creek world that do not survive in stone. The calls of birds and non-avian dinosaurs, the scrape of beaks on vegetation, the splash of turtles, the movement of insects. wind in broad leaves, thunder over a coastal plain. T. Rex may have vocalized with low sounds, though the exact nature of its calls is unknown. It is safer to imagine a range of hisses, rumbles, bellows, closed-mouth resonances, or other sounds than to give it the cinematic roar that belongs more to theaters than to fossils. Modern birds and crocodilians offer clues because they bracket dinosaurs on the family tree. Both groups use sound, posture, and display in complex ways. T. Rex may have communicated with body position, head movement, scent, low-frequency sound, and visual signals around the face or body. But the details are lost. No fossil records a mating call. No bone tells us how a mother sounded near a nest. The absence of evidence is not silence in life. It is silence in the record. Reproduction is one of the most difficult parts of T-Rex life to reconstruct. We do not have confirmed T-Rex eggs or nests. Related theropods show that many dinosaurs laid eggs in arranged clutches, sometimes in nests that suggest brooding or careful placement. Large tyrannosaurs may have chosen nesting sites with attention to drainage, cover, temperature, and safety. But any detailed scene must remain cautious, built from relatives rather than direct proof. Still, every T-Rex came from somewhere. There had to be a place where eggs rested, where embryos developed, where the first cracks opened in shell. The young did not appear in museum posture. They emerged weak, small, and exposed, into a world that would not wait for them. The ultimate predator began life as prey-sized. Parental care is possible, but not confirmed. Birds show intense parental behavior. Crocodilians guard nests and young. Many non-avian dinosaurs likely had some form of reproductive behavior more complex than simply abandoning eggs, though it varied by group. For T-Rex, direct evidence is lacking. A careful script can allow the possibility that adults guarded nests or territories, but it cannot state it as fact. What we can say is that reproductive success required enough young to survive a dangerous floodplain. The shape of growth may have reduced competition between ages. If juveniles fed on smaller prey and adults on large carcasses and large herbivores, then young and old T-Rex did not use the environment in exactly the same way. This is common in living animals. Crocodiles, birds, sharks, and many reptiles change diet as they grow. T-Rex likely did too, because the skull and body changed too dramatically for the same hunting style to fit every age. A slender juvenile moving through dense vegetation would experience the world differently from a heavy adult. It could turn more quickly. It could pursue smaller animals. It could hide more easily. It might be more vulnerable to larger predators, including adult tyrannosaurs. It may have avoided the centers of adult territories, or it may have followed adults at times to scavenge. The evidence is incomplete, but the ecological logic is strong. Tracks, if we had enough of them, could tell us more. A series of footprints can show speed, group movement, turning, slipping, or hesitation. It can show whether animals move together or cross the same place at different times. But T-Rex trackways remain rare, and large theropod tracks are often difficult to assign to a particular species unless the time, place, and anatomy match closely. The ground remembers selectively. Bone beds also remember selectively. A quarry may collect animals that died in one event or over many years. Water can mix remains from different individuals. Scavengers can scatter bones before burial. A site rich in tyrannosaur material may suggest behavior, but it may also reflect transport, preservation, or repeated deaths at a trap. Paleontology is powerful because it is physical, but it is also patient because physical evidence has limits. Even the title Ultimate Predator needs care. T-Rex was not ultimate because it was perfect. No animal is. It was ultimate because, within its late Cretaceous ecosystems, it combined size, sensory ability, skull strength, tooth design, growth strategy, and ecological flexibility in a way few land predators have matched. It could hunt, it could scavenge, it could process bone, it could intimidate competitors, it could feed on the largest herbivores in its world. That combination set it apart from earlier giant theropods. Allosaurus, from the Jurassic, had a different skull and bite style. Carcharodontosaurids were immense blade-toothed predators, but their teeth and skulls emphasized slicing more than crushing. Spinosaurus was highly specialized in ways still debated, with a body tied strongly to aquatic or semi-aquatic feeding. T. Rex belongs to the end of a long experiment in theropod predation, and its experiment centered on the deep, forceful skull. There is something almost excessive about that skull until you place it in its world. The prey were enormous. The carcasses were armored, horned, thick-skinned, and heavy. A predator feeding on them needed more than sharp edges. It needed to break through. It needed to hold. It needed to twist, pull, and return. The skull was not an ornament of terror. It was a solution to a Cretaceous problem. The problem changed as the animal aged. A young T-Rex did not need to open a Triceratops pelvis. It needed to catch smaller prey, avoid larger bodies, and live long enough to transform. During its fastest growth, it needed immense calories. Every year of added mass raised the cost of survival, but also increased access to food. Growth was a gamble. The animal became safer from some threats while becoming more dependent on large meals. Imagine an adolescent tyrannosaur at the edge of a floodplain after a storm. The water has pulled back from the lowest ground, leaving silt over leaves and broken branches. Small fish rot in shallow pools. Insects gather. A dead turtle lies overturned near a bank. The young predator investigates everything. It is too large to behave like a small hunter, too small to dominate like an adult. Its world is transitional, and so is its body. Years pass in bone. The skull broadens, the teeth thicken, the hips carry more weight. The animal's steps sink deeper into wet sediment. Other animals respond sooner when it appears. It no longer needs to hide from as many threats, but it must now manage the attention of rivals. A growing tyrannosaur is not simply gaining power, it is entering a new social and ecological class. Adult T-Rex individuals may have competed fiercely. A carcass large enough to feed one animal could draw others from downwind. Two adults meeting at food would face a decision. One might yield. One might display. One might lunge. A bite to the face could settle the matter or create injuries that lasted years. The fossil record does not give us the full sequence, but the wounds show that conflict happened. Sexual behavior is even harder to approach. Differences between male and female T-Rex have been proposed at times, but confident sexing of most skeletons is difficult. One specimen preserving medullary bone, a reproductive tissue found in ovulating female birds, offered evidence that at least that individual was female. Such rare clues remind us that these skeletons were not just predators. They were males and females, breeding animals, bodies shaped by reproduction as well as feeding. Display may have mattered. Many large animals use the head, face, posture, sound, scent, or movement to communicate fitness and identity. T-Rex had a massive skull, textured facial bones, and forward-facing eyes. The face may have carried color or keratinous surfaces in life, though the details are unknown. It is possible that tyrannosaurs recognized individuals or assessed rivals through features that fossil bone only partly preserves. A living T-Rex approaching another would not need to fight immediately. It could turn sideways to show size. It could lower or raise the head. It could vocalize. It could scent mark, rub against vegetation, or investigate traces left by others. Modern animals are full of such behavior, most of it brief and practical. The absence of direct fossil evidence should keep us cautious, but not blind to the fact that large predators are social enough to negotiate danger. The animal also slept. That simple fact is rarely shown. but every brain needs rest. A T-Rex may have settled on folded legs, body lowered, tail arranged behind it, skull resting or held alert depending on the moment. Rising from rest would have required coordination of hind limbs, tail, torso, and perhaps forelimbs. A sleeping giant on a shaded bank is as real a part of the species as a hunting one. Rest could happen near water, in forest shade, or on higher ground where breezes carried scent. A predator at rest is still part of the ecosystem. Small animals might approach once it was still. Insects might crawl across its skin. Birds might call above it. The chest would move with breath. Heat would leave the body slowly. The world around it would continue, not as a stage awaiting action, but as an ancient place filled with ordinary time. Rex was a late survivor in a long dinosaur world. When it lived, Stegosaurus had already been gone for tens of millions of years. Apatosaurus and the classic Jurassic sauropods were ancient history. Even many famous Cretaceous dinosaurs did not share its exact time and place. Rex belongs to the last pages of the Mesozoic, closer in time to the asteroid impact than to much of the dinosaur age that popular imagination places beside it. This late position matters because T-Rex was not primitive. It was not an early experiment. It was a highly derived theropod living after more than 160 million years of dinosaur evolution. Birds already existed. Flowering plants had spread. Mammals were diverse, though mostly small. Ecosystems had changed repeatedly. Rex stood near the end, not because it was failing, but because the world itself was about to be interrupted. There is no sign that Rex was fading away before the end. In its ecosystems, it was successful. It was abundant enough to appear repeatedly in fossil deposits. It occupied the top predatory role across a large region. Its prey were present. Its lineage had become dominant in Western North America. The end that came was not a simple story of decline. It was an external catastrophe that struck a living world. Before that catastrophe, generations of T-Rex lived complete lives. The species may have existed for a couple of million years, though estimates vary depending on definitions and fossil interpretation. That span is brief compared with the whole Mesozoic, but immense compared with human history. Within it, countless individuals hatched, grew, hunted, scavenged, fought, reproduced, and died. The fossil record gives us a handful. The species was a multitude. To follow one possible life, begin before the animal has a name, before the adult skull, before the bite force, before the museum mount. Begin in low vegetation near a channel that has recently shifted course. The ground is damp, but not flooded. Plant roots hold the bank together. Insects move across leaves. Somewhere under cover, a clutch of eggs warms in sediment, vegetation, or a nest structure we cannot describe with certainty. The evidence for T-Rex nesting is missing, but the biology requires a beginning like this, protected enough for incubation, exposed enough to be dangerous. The shell itself, if it belonged to a tyrannosaur, would have been part of a broader theropod reproductive world. Fossil eggs from other theropods show that dinosaur eggs varied in shape, shell structure, and nesting arrangement. Some were elongated, some were laid in pairs. Some nests show careful spacing. Rex eggs remain unknown, so any reconstruction must borrow cautiously from relatives. But no caution changes the basic fact that the largest predator in Hell Creek began inside a breakable container. When the young animal emerged, it did not carry the authority of the adult. Its bones were still unfinished. Its skull was light. Its body was narrow. It may have had a covering different from that of an adult, perhaps more insulation if young tyrannosaurs retained feather-like filaments, though the evidence is indirect. It would have depended on hiding, quick movement, and perhaps some level of parental protection if such behavior existed. The first world it knew was not the open floodplain. It was close ground, shadows under plants, mud, roots, and danger. Small animals are not simply miniature versions of large animals. They lose heat differently. They need food frequently. They are more vulnerable to dehydration, cold, trampling, and predation. A young tyrannosaur might feed on prey so small that an adult would ignore it entirely. Insects, lizards, mammals, baby turtles, amphibians, nestlings, scraps of meat, and bits of carrion could all matter. The future bone crusher may have spent its earliest months snapping at animals hidden under leaves. Danger came from every direction. A crocodile relative at the edge of a pond would not care that the hatchling belonged to a famous species. A large pterosaur or predatory bird might take small prey if the chance appeared. Bigger juvenile theropods could attack it. Adult herbivores could kill it by accident. Floodwater could drown it. A single night of exposure could weaken it. The title ultimate predator belongs to the survivors, not to the beginning. If the young animal survived into its next years, its legs became more important. Juvenile tyrannosaurs, as reconstructed from the broader evidence of tyrannosaur growth, were proportionally more lightly built than adults. Their skulls were shallower, their teeth narrower, and their limbs suited to a different kind of movement. This does not mean they were harmless. It means their danger was scaled to different prey. They may have filled the role of fast, mid-sized hunters in the same ecosystems where adults occupied the heaviest predatory tier. Recent arguments about Nanotyrannus complicate this picture because some fossils once used to represent teenage T. Rex may not belong to T-Rex at all. That matters. Science changes when specimens are reinterpreted. But it does not erase the life stages of T. Rex, the species still had juveniles. They still grew. The uncertainty asks us to be more cautious about exact proportions, not to imagine adults appearing fully formed from the ground. A juvenile tyrannosaur, moving through a stand of young trees, would experience the forest at eye level. It would see the undersides of leaves, the bodies of insects, the quick motion of small mammals, and the legs of larger dinosaurs passing nearby. It might follow scent trails left by carcasses or by other predators. It might learn that some sounds mean opportunity and others mean retreat. Learning, in such an animal, would not be abstract. It would be built from repeated contact with consequence. A missed strike costs little if the prey is small and the hunger is not desperate. A reckless approach to an adult triceratops costs much more. Natural selection does not need to teach with intention. It teaches by removing animals that misjudge too often. The juvenile that survives is the one that matches its behavior to its body, its prey, and the ground beneath it. Those lessons accumulate long before adulthood. Bone growth is a quiet record of those years. Under a microscope, fossil bone can show zones of faster and slower deposition, blood vessel patterns, remodeling, and lines that mark changes in growth. The animal's outward life, the chase, the flood, the wound, the meal, becomes inward structure. Paleontologists read that structure not as a diary, but as evidence of pace. The skeleton grew in pulses, and each pulse belonged to a living season. At some point, the young T-Rex entered the most demanding part of its life. Rapid growth requires energy, and energy requires food. The animal had to feed enough not only to maintain itself, but to build tons of new tissue over years. This is one reason the adolescent stage may have been so ecologically important. A growing tyrannosaur is hungry in a way a stable adult may not be. It is turning prey into body at an extraordinary rate. The skull begins to change the rules. A narrow juvenile bite can wound and slice. A deepening adult bite can break. As the jaws become broader, the prey that can be safely attacked changes. The animal may begin testing larger targets, not always successfully. A subadult might chase a smaller ornithomimid one day, scavenge from a carcass the next, then follow a herd from a distance, learning the patterns of animals too large to attack directly until the moment is favorable. This transformation is one of the most remarkable things about T. Rex. Within one lifetime, the animal crossed from the scale of the undergrowth to the scale of the canopy edge. It began among small bodies and ended among giants. A single individual could have watched its own footprints deepen year by year, though not with our awareness, as the same floodplain that once threatened to swallow it began to carry its weight. Scientists sometimes use the term ontogeny for the growth and development of an individual. In T-Rex, ontogeny is not a side issue, it is central to the animal's ecology. The species did not only occupy one niche. Its life stages may have spread predatory pressure across several niches. This may help explain how an ecosystem could support such a large apex predator without needing a wide variety of other giant carnivorous dinosaurs beside it. The young animal's world also had textures that rarely enter reconstructions. Wet leaves brushing the snout, fine sediment clinging to the toes, the resistance of a struggling lizard between small teeth, the sharp scent of a fresh wound. The sudden stillness when a larger predator passed. The warmth of decaying plant matter. The hard edge of a turtle shell too difficult to open. Life is made of small contacts long before it becomes spectacular. As the animal matured, the respiratory system also mattered. Like other saurischian dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurs likely had air sacs associated with a bird-like respiratory system, though the exact soft tissue arrangement cannot be fossilized directly. Pneumatic spaces in bones and comparison with living birds help paleontologists infer efficient breathing in theropods. For a large active predator, moving oxygen through the body efficiently would have been a significant advantage. Breathing is not dramatic, but it is one of the foundations of size and activity. Muscles need oxygen. A massive head and neck need support. A large body generates heat and must manage it. Every step, every bite, every recovery from injury depends on ordinary physiology. Rex was not only teeth and bones, it was circulation, respiration, digestion, temperature balance, immune response, and growth. Digestion, too, shaped behavior. A predator that swallows large pieces of meat and bone must process them chemically and mechanically. The stomach and intestines are gone, but living archosaurs and carnivorous animals give some clues. Strong acids, muscular movement, and microbial processes would break down meals over time. After feeding heavily, a tyrannosaur's priorities may have shifted from pursuit to rest, from risk to concealment, from action to processing. Heat could also matter. A multi-ton animal does not warm and cool quickly. In a warm Cretaceous climate, an adult T-Rex may have avoided the worst heat of the day when possible, moving in morning, evening, shade, or along water. It may have stood with mouth open at times, used behavior to regulate temperature, or relied on blood flow through tissues to shed heat. The exact mechanisms are uncertain, but the problem is unavoidable. Feathers, scales, and body covering connect to that same problem. A small juvenile might benefit from insulation. A giant adult in a warm environment might not need the same covering across the whole body. This is one reason reconstructions can differ by age, as well as species. The evidence for scaly skin in parts of large tyrannosaurids does not necessarily tell us every surface of every life stage. It gives us pieces of a more complicated animal. Color and display may have changed with age, too. Many living animals alter appearance as they mature. Juveniles can be camouflaged while adults develop signals. Rex may have had facial coloration, skin texture, or keratinous features used in recognition or display. No fossil currently lets us paint it with confidence, but a living population almost certainly contained visual variation beyond the uniform gray or brown bodies often imagined. An adult stepping into open light would have been a visual event. The skull alone could catch attention. Broad snout, deep jaw, textured bone under skin, eyes set forward, teeth hidden or partly hidden depending on soft tissue reconstruction. The body behind it would be huge but balanced, not dragging, not sluggish, not a crude reptile enlarged beyond sense. It was an animal made coherent by evolution. Coherence also appears in the neck. Rex needed powerful neck muscles to move the head quickly, resist forces during feeding, and pull against prey. The skull could not function alone. A bite begins at the jaws, but the neck positions the head, drives motion, and absorbs stress. When feeding, the animal may have used its neck to wrench tissue free, shake pieces loose, and shift the skull for better leverage. Picture the head entering a carcass. The jaws close. The neck tightens. The body leans back. One foot braces in mud. The tail counterbalances. The skull pulls, not as a simple clamp, but as part of a chain of force running from teeth to neck to spine to hips to ground. The carcass resists until tissue fails. This is the animal's anatomy becoming action. The teeth were not all identical. Positions in the jaw differed in shape and function. The front teeth of Tyrannosaurs could be more closely packed and reinforced, useful for gripping and scraping. The side teeth were large and thick, with serrated edges for cutting and crushing. Tooth crowns changed through the mouth, and replacement teeth waited beneath. The jaw was not a row of interchangeable spikes. It was a structured feeding system. Shed teeth are among the most intimate fossils because they come from the mouth, but not necessarily from death. An animal can lose a tooth and walk away. The tooth can remain where a moment happened: a feeding site, a river crossing, a resting place, a place where jaws worked briefly over bone. A skeleton often tells the end of life. A shed tooth can tell a passing moment. The ground receives these moments without preference. A tooth from a famous predator and a seed from a plant fall into the same sediment. A turtle shell and a tyrannosaur rib are buried by the same flood. Fossilization is not impressed by size. It preserves what conditions allow. Sometimes the smallest fossils reveal the world around the largest animals more clearly than the giant bones themselves. Fossil plants from late Cretaceous deposits show that T. rex lived after flowering plants had already transformed many terrestrial ecosystems. This separates its world from earlier dinosaur landscapes dominated almost entirely by conifers, cycads, ginkgos, and ferns. Hell Creek vegetation included angiosperm trees and shrubs, along with conifers, ferns, and other plants. The result was not a modern forest, but it was also not the classic Jurassic forest. That matters for herbivores. Different plants mean different feeding strategies. Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, and other herbivores processed vegetation shaped by the late Cretaceous plant world. Their abundance and movement reflected plant distribution. In turn, T. rex followed the herbivores. The predator's life was indirectly tied to flowering plant evolution, river soils, leaf chemistry, and the seasonal productivity of floodplain vegetation. Imagine the smell after rain. Wet leaves, churned mud, river water, dung, crushed stems, and the faint odor of a carcass somewhere beyond the trees. For a strong-nosed predator, the landscape would not be a flat visual scene. It would be layered with information. Some scents were hours old, some fresh, some carried from far away, some trapped low near the ground. The animal's head moved through an invisible map. Following scent does not mean walking directly to food. Wind shifts. Rain interrupts. Other animals cross the trail. A carcass can be guarded. A wounded animal can move into dangerous terrain. A predator must constantly update. T. rex may have paused often, head raised, sampling air, then lowered the snout to investigate ground or vegetation. The search for food was a process, not a straight line. Vision added another layer. Forward-facing eyes help judge distance, especially when the head is large and the bite must land accurately. A predator closing with prey needs to know where the body is, how fast it is moving, where horns or limbs might strike, and when to commit. Depth perception does not make an animal intelligent by itself, but it supports precise action. In T. rex, the skull suggests that precision mattered. The eyes also complicate old myths. The idea that T. rex could not see a still animal is not supported by its anatomy. A living T-Rex would have been visually capable in ways that made sense for a large active predator. Standing still in front of it would not be a magic defense. More likely, the animal would use smell, vision, hearing, and context together, as real predators do. In the forest, that combination would make the animal difficult to evade, not because it was supernatural, but because it could gather evidence from several channels: a sound in brush, a scent on wind, a shape between trunks, a tremor of movement among leaves. A predator does not need certainty at first. It needs enough reason to investigate. Prey animals evolved under that pressure. Herding, vigilance, armor, horns, body size, speed, and habitat choice all reduce risk. Triceratops did not have horns because of T-Rex alone, and Edmontosaurus did not live in groups only because of tyrannosaurs, but predation was part of the selective environment. The predator and prey were not isolated designs. They were responses to each other and to the landscape around them. A young Triceratops near a forest edge would be a different opportunity from an adult in open ground. A sick Edmontosaurus lagging behind a group would draw attention differently from a healthy animal in the center of a herd. An Ankylosaurus caught in soft mud might be vulnerable in a way it was not on firm ground. T-Rex did not hunt a category. It encountered individuals under specific conditions. The moment before an attack might be almost quiet. No roar announces it. Roaring wastes surprise. The predator closes distance using cover or terrain. The prey senses something and shifts. A bird lifts. A hadrosaur turns its head. Then, the ground breaks into motion. Mud tears under feet. Branches snap. A bite lands or misses. The whole event may last seconds, but its consequences can last years in healed bone. We should not overstate how often T-Rex killed large, healthy adults. Modern predators generally prefer safer targets when available. Juveniles, injured animals, isolated individuals, and carcasses are efficient choices. A predator that constantly attacks the strongest prey is a predator that accumulates injuries. T-Rex had the equipment to attack large animals, but the fossil record does not require it to behave recklessly. Its massive bite may have been especially useful once contact was made. A single deep bite could cause mechanical damage, blood loss, infection, or reduced mobility. Even if prey escaped, the wound could alter its future. If the animal later died, the predator might find it again, or another scavenger might. In ecosystems, the boundary between hunting and scavenging can blur over time. A failed attack can create a future carcass. There is a patience to that kind of predation. The predator does not need to finish every encounter immediately. It may follow, it may abandon, it may return to scent later. A wounded herbivore becomes part of the landscape's information. Other predators may notice too. The floodplain gathers consequences, and animals read them. T-Rex was probably both opportunist and specialist. Opportunist because it would use carrion, vulnerable prey, and whatever large food sources appeared. Specialist because its anatomy was strongly suited to large-bodied feeding and bone processing. Those two ideas are not contradictory. Many successful predators are specialized in equipment, but flexible in behavior. T-Rex could be built for power and still take easy food when available. Consider a dead Triceratops found after a flood. The body lies partly on its side, one horn pressed into mud, frill tilted, skin torn by smaller scavengers. A T-Rex approaches cautiously at first, because carcasses can attract rivals. It smells the body, circles, tests tissue with the teeth. The skull lowers to the hip, the ribs, the base of the neck. Bones begin to record contact. The feeding animal may bite repeatedly, not neatly. Teeth enter at slightly different angles. Some marks overlap. A crown chips. A rib breaks. The head pulls back with a strip of tissue. Smaller scavengers wait beyond reach. If another tyrannosaur arrives, the the entire scene changes. Food is no longer only food. It is a point of conflict. A rival does not need to kill to win. It only needs to make staying more expensive than leaving. Two animals may size each other up through posture, sound, and movement. If they clash, wounds can be severe. A bite across the snout, a crushed tooth, a damaged eye region, a torn jaw muscle, any of these could affect feeding. The cost of conflict helps explain why display and intimidation are so common among large animals. Not every meeting ended badly. Tolerance may have occurred, especially if food was abundant or if individuals were related. Some living predators feed near each other under certain conditions and fight under others. T. Rex could have had a flexible social life, sometimes solitary, sometimes drawn into temporary gatherings. The fossil evidence is not enough to make a simple rule. The animal likely did not live by one. Population density would have been low compared with smaller animals. Large predators require space and food. Even if T. Rex was relatively common in some fossil deposits, that does not mean adults stood behind every tree. The landscape had to support them through herbivore biomass. Individuals may have ranged widely, crossing river systems, forest patches, and open areas as prey and carcasses shifted. A single adult range might include places of repeated importance: a bend in the river where carcasses lodged, a high bank safe from floods, a corridor used by hadrosaurs, a nesting area for herbivores, a stretch of forest rich in shade, a shoreline where smells traveled clearly. The animal would not understand territory as a map on paper. It would know it through movement, scent, memory, and return. Memory is difficult to prove in fossils, but impossible to exclude from life. A predator that remembers where water lasts in dry periods has an advantage. One that remembers where herds cross a channel has an advantage. One that recognizes a dangerous rival or a profitable feeding site has an advantage. The brain of T. Rex was not human, but it belonged to an animal for whom place mattered. The brain case of Tyrannosaurs has been studied with CT scans that reveal internal cavities, nerve pathways, and inner ear structures. These do not show thoughts, but they do show sensory priorities. Large olfactory bulbs point toward smell. Inner ear structure gives clues about balance and hearing. Cranial nerves suggest sensitivity in parts of the head. The skull becomes a fossilized outline of perception. Perception is what turns a landscape into behavior. The same riverbank means different things to different animals. To a turtle, it may be basking space. To a hadrosaur, a drinking point. To a crocodile relative, an ambush edge. To a T-Rex, it may be a scent corridor, a prey crossing, a carcass trap, or a risky place where mud can betray the feet. The world is not one world to all creatures. Feet matter again here. A T-Rex stepping into soft mud had to manage pressure. The toes spread force through pads. The claws gripped or slipped depending on sediment. The hind limbs absorbed weight. The tail adjusted balance. A failed step could twist joints or strain muscle. In a fight or chase, footing might decide the outcome before teeth did. Because soft tissue is lost, reconstructions of locomotion must combine bones, muscle attachment estimates, computer models, living relatives, and tracks. Each method has assumptions. Some studies emphasize bone stress limits. Others estimate preferred walking speeds from tail mechanics or track spacing. The result is not one final number, but a range of plausible movement. The safest image is an efficient walker with powerful bursts, not an animal built for endless sprinting. That image is not less frightening. A predator that can walk for hours, follow scent, and strike with overwhelming force is dangerous in a different way from a sprinter. It does not need to win a race across an open plain if the ecosystem gives it cover, carcasses, vulnerable prey, and repeated chances. The life of T-Rex was probably not built around constant pursuit. It was built around opportunity. Injury could remove opportunity quickly. A broken toe, a torn muscle, a damaged jaw, or an infected wound might mean starvation. Fossil pathologies show that some tyrannosaurs survived serious injuries, but survival is not the same as comfort. Pain would change movement. It would change prey choice. It might force greater reliance on scavenging. It might make a rival more threatening. It might turn a dominant animal into a vulnerable one. An old T-Rex may have carried many such histories. Worn joints, healed ribs, broken teeth replaced by new ones, scars on the face, a limp that appeared in damp weather, a jaw that did not close quite as cleanly as before. We cannot assign all of this to one specimen without evidence, but aging is universal. A predator that lives long enough becomes a record of what failed to kill it. Maximum age estimates for T-Rex have changed as new methods and specimens are studied. Some classic growth studies suggested individuals in their 20s with rapid growth before maturity. More recent analyses have explored longer growth histories and older ages for some individuals. These refinements matter, but the life history pattern remains striking: a large theropod growing quickly enough to dominate, yet living long enough to accumulate substantial injury and experience. Teeth, unlike limbs, were replaceable. That gave T-Rex resilience in feeding. A broken crown was a problem, but not necessarily a permanent one. Replacement teeth developed in the jaw and moved into position over time. This system let theropods maintain functional mouths despite hard use. For a bone-crushing predator, such renewal was essential. Without it, the feeding strategy would consume the tools too quickly. A jaw with developing replacement teeth is a hidden future. Beneath the visible mouth, new crowns wait in bone, not yet exposed to air or blood. The animal bites, breaks, feeds, loses, and renews. The mouth is always becoming itself again. A shed tooth in the mud is not only loss, it is evidence of a system designed to continue. The bite also required restraint. If the animal bit at full force every time, it would risk damaging its own teeth and skull. Living predators modulate force depending on task. They nip, grip, crush, pull, and test. T-Rex likely did the same. The maximum bite force is impressive, but the everyday use of the jaws was probably varied and controlled. This is often missed when numbers become the focus. A bite force estimate is not a behavior, it is a capacity. The animal still had to decide when to use that capacity, where to place the bite, and how to respond when prey moved. Fossils give us the upper range of possibility and traces of actual contact. Between them lies the living moment. That living moment could be slow. A T-Rex may spend minutes investigating a carcass before feeding. It may sniff along the belly, test the skin, pull at an opening, shift position, and only then commit force. It may avoid horned parts of a body and feed from safer angles. It may drag pieces away. It may step back when bone splinters or when another animal approaches. Feeding is behavior, not just anatomy. At a distance, the scene might look almost calm. A giant head lowering and rising. Birds circling. Insects thick in the air. Water moving nearby. The predator's body steady over the carcass. Only up close does the violence become visible. The tearing edges, the cracked ribs, the wet sound of tissue giving way, the pressure of teeth against bone. In time, the carcass becomes part of the sediment system. Bones left on a floodplain weather in stages. They crack under sun. They are moved by scavengers. They may be trampled into mud. Floods can transport them, sort them by size, and bury them in sandbars or channel fills. Many fossils are not found where the animal died. They are found where geology finally left them. A paleontologist seeing those bones must ask what happened after death before asking what happened in life. Are the bones articulated? Still connected? Are they scattered? Are delicate bones present or missing? Are there tooth marks? Are the edges rounded by transport? What sediment surrounds them? A T-Rex skeleton is not only anatomy, it is a crime scene altered by water, time and stone. The Hell Creek Formation has been studied intensely because it preserves the last slice of the Cretaceous in such detail. Its rocks record environments before and after the mass extinction. In some places, the boundary clay marks the moment when the Mesozoic ended and the Paleogene began. Below that boundary, dinosaurs like T-Rex are part of the fauna. Above it, the non-avian dinosaurs are gone. That boundary gives every T-Rex fossil an additional weight. The animal is already extraordinary as a predator, but it also stands close to one of the most consequential events in the history of life. It belonged to a world that was not failing in any simple way, yet would soon be transformed. Its bones lie just beneath a planetary dividing line. Still, the animal did not live as an ending. It lived in present tense. It did not carry extinction in its body. It carried hunger, injury, growth, and instinct. It knew the smell of water, the movement of prey, the presence of rivals, the feel of mud underfoot. The boundary is ours. The life was its own. Return to a prime adult before that boundary. It is moving along a forested levee in late afternoon. Sunlight breaks through broad leaves and conifers. The ground is uneven with roots. A herd of Tyrannosaurus has passed recently, leaving dung, tracks, and crushed plants. The Tyrannosaur follows, not rushing. Its head stays low for a time, then rises to catch the wind. The herd is not visible yet. Sound reaches first. Bodies moving, a low call, water disturbed somewhere ahead. The predator pauses. A smaller theropod slips away through fern cover. Birds shift in branches. The Tyrannosaur angles away from the most direct route and moves along the cover of trees. This is not a plan in the human sense, but it is not mindless either. It is behavior shaped by experience. One animal in the herd is limping. Perhaps an old injury. Perhaps a recent slip in mud. The Tyrannosaur does not need to understand cause. It needs only the difference. A healthy adult hadrosaur can still be dangerous through size and movement. A limping one changes the calculation. The predator closes distance. The herd senses danger. The floodplain shifts from feeding to alarm. The first rush is confusion. Bodies turn. Mud breaks. Water splashes. The Tyrannosaur's head comes forward. If the bite lands, the force is immediate and specific. If it misses, the cost is energy and lost advantage. A large predator cannot throw itself endlessly at prey. It must recover, reassess, maybe continue, maybe stop. Predation is full of unfinished attempts. We cannot know how such a scene ended on any given day. The fossil record gives examples of contact, but not the full ratio of success to failure. Modern predators fail often, sometimes most of the time. Rex likely failed too. Failure rarely fossilizes unless it leaves injury. Yet failure is central to the life of a hunter. It teaches, limits, and shapes future choices. If the prey escaped with a wound, the story did not end. Infection might follow. Movement might become harder. The herd might slow for the injured individual or leave it behind. The Tyrannosaur might follow scent later, or another predator might benefit. A single bite could ripple through days of behavior. Fossils with healed wounds show survival, but they also show that survival had a history. If the prey fell, the floodplain would gather. The Tyrannosaur feeds. Smaller animals wait. Insects arrive. The herd moves on, carrying alarm into the trees. The river keeps flowing. Nothing in the landscape stops to mark the event as important. The importance comes later, if a tooth remains, if bone is buried, if stone preserves the aftermath. This balance between event and evidence is why T-Rex can be studied without being fully known. We can know its anatomy in remarkable detail and still not know the exact sound of its breathing. We can estimate bite force and still not know how often it hunted Triceratops. We can examine growth rings and still not know how many hatchlings survived their first year. Paleontology gives real knowledge, not complete resurrection. The gaps are not empty. They are the places where caution belongs. A good reconstruction does not fill every gap with drama. It leaves some things unresolved because the animal itself is gone. The power of T. Rex lies partly in what the evidence can show, and partly in the discipline required not to claim more than the evidence allows. Even with caution, the outline is extraordinary. A late Cretaceous theropod, roughly bus length in adult body size, with a skull over a meter long, a powerful bite, thick serrated teeth, strong smell, forward-facing eyes, efficient bipedal movement, changing growth stages, and a role at the top of Western North American food webs. Few fossil animals can be described with such a combination of evidence and impact. The ultimate predator, then, is not a title awarded by fear. It is a summary of converging traits. Size without senses would fail. Teeth without jaw strength would fail. Strength without prey would fail. Predatory ability without growth and reproduction would fail. T. Rex brought these systems together at the end of the Cretaceous, and for its time, in its place, the result was unmatched. But the animal's life still returns to small things. A nostril lifting into wind. A toe spreading in mud. A tooth pushing upward in the jaw. A young animal watching from cover. A healed wound thickening with new bone. A rib rising with breath. These are the details that keep the tyrant from becoming a symbol only. When people stand before a T-Rex skeleton, they often look first at the mouth. That is natural. The mouth is enormous, but the ribs are worth looking at. So are the feet. So are the hips, the tail vertebrae, the tiny arms, the openings in the skull, the scars, the asymmetries. The whole skeleton is the animal, not just the part that frightens us. A mount also involves choices. Posture is interpreted. Missing bones may be cast from other specimens. Cartilage and soft tissue are absent, so joint spacing must be estimated. The skeleton in a hall is both fossil and reconstruction, evidence and display. It can teach, but it is not the living body. The living body was heavier, warmer, and less clean than bone under lights. That difference should stay with any T-Rex story. The animal did not live in museum white. It lived in weather. Its feet were dirty. Its skin carried marks. Its teeth broke and regrew. Its meals smelled. Its body hosted parasites. Its wounds hurt. Its movements were constrained by terrain. It was magnificent because it was biological, not because it was polished into legend. Legends often remove death, except as spectacle. Fossils return death to the center. Every skeleton is a dead individual. Every tooth is lost material. Every track is a moment that survived while the animal did not. T. Rex fascinates because it was powerful, but the evidence reaches us because it was mortal. The ultimate predator entered the same ground as everything it fed upon. In the end, a T-Rex body on a floodplain would become still. The eyes would dry. The muscles would loosen. The smell would change. Scavengers would approach with caution, then confidence. Insects would enter. Water might rise. Skin would split. Bones would separate. The animal that once organized danger around itself would become food, habitat, and sediment. This reversal is not weakness, it is ecology. The predator becomes resource. The body that processed herbivores is processed by smaller mouths, microbes, water, and minerals. The top of the food web folds back into the base. A T-Rex carcass could feed insects, reptiles, mammals, other theropods, crocodile relatives, and eventually plants through the return of nutrients. Even the tyrant is recycled. Only if burial came quickly enough did part of it leave the cycle and enter the record. A jaw settled into sand. A femur sank into mud. A tooth lodged between roots. Sediment covered the remains, sealing them away from the ordinary hunger of the surface. The body disappeared from the living world and began its long passage into stone. There is another way to understand T-Rex by looking at what it was not. It was not the first giant predator. It was not the largest animal on land. It was not a creature from the Jurassic, despite how often the name Jurassic is used for every dinosaur. It was a late Cretaceous specialist, separated from the classic Jurassic giants by more time than separates humans from the last non-avian dinosaurs. Its world was younger in the history of dinosaurs, more floral, more familiar in some plants, and closer to the boundary that would end it. Stegosaurus never saw T-Rex, Brachiosaurus never heard it. Allosaurus belonged to a much older predator world. This matters because dinosaur history is not one crowded scene, it is a long sequence of changing ecosystems. T-Rex appears after many famous dinosaurs were already fossils, if they were preserved at all. It stands near the last chapter of a story that had begun in the Triassic and transformed through the Jurassic and Cretaceous. The animal's fame sometimes compresses time until all dinosaurs seem to share one landscape. The rocks do not allow that. They separate worlds. Morrison Formation floodplains are not Hell Creek floodplains. Jurassic conifer forests are not late Cretaceous flowering plant communities. The predator Allosaurus was not a smaller T-Rex waiting for improvement. It was its own animal in its own time. T-Rex was the result of a different history. Tyrannosaurs became dominant in North America after other large theropod groups were no longer occupying the same apex roles there. The reasons involve evolution, geography, extinction, and changing ecosystems, not a simple contest in which T-Rex defeated earlier predators. Over time, tyrannosaurids developed the deep skulls, strong jaws, and sensory specializations that culminated in T-Rex and its close relatives. Their rise was a historical process, not a single takeover. By the time T-Rex walked Hell Creek, the Tyrannosaur body plan had become almost architectural. The massive skull formed the front tower. The hips and legs were the pillars. The tail was the counterbeam. The ribs held the engine of lungs, heart, and digestion. The body was not elegant in the slender sense, but it had a severe balance to it, the balance of a structure built around impact. That impact could be directed downward into a carcass, sideways into prey, or forward into contact with a rival. The skull had to survive all of these. It had to transmit force without shattering. It had to protect the brain and sensory organs while serving as the animal's primary tool. The engineering challenge was immense, and the fossil skulls show how evolution solved it with openings, reinforcements, broad muscle attachments, and teeth shaped for punishment. Yet even this skull had limits. Teeth could break, bone could crack, joints could suffer stress. If a prey animal twisted at the wrong moment, force might travel back into the predator. If a horn struck the face, the hunter could be blinded or wounded. If a bite landed badly on armor or hard bone, the tooth could chip. The feeding system was powerful because it worked near the edge of what living tissue could endure. That edge is where the animal feels most real. It was not an invincible design. It was a successful design under pressure. Every adult skeleton is evidence that the system worked long enough for that individual. Every pathology is evidence that it did not work perfectly. Between those truths is the life of T-Rex. The surrounding herbivores were not background species. Triceratops was among the most abundant large dinosaurs in Hell Creek samples. Edmontosaurus was a major hadrosaur presence. Ankylosaurus was rarer but formidable. Smaller dinosaurs filled other roles, including Thescelosaurus and Pachycephalosaurs. The predator's food web depended on the structure of these herbivore communities, and those communities depended on plants, water, and climate. A herd of Edmontosaurus moving across a floodplain would leave more than tracks. It would crop vegetation, break branches, spread seeds, disturb insects, fertilized soil, and open paths used by smaller animals. Triceratops feeding in low growth would shape plant communities near the ground. Ankylosaurs moving slowly through cover would create their own disturbances. T. Rex followed the consequences of herbivore life, not just their bodies. Herbivores also carried information. Dung could show what plants they ate. Toothwear can reveal feeding mechanics. Isotopes in bones and teeth can help reconstruct aspects of diet and environment. The predator's world can be approached through its prey, because prey animals are the stored energy that made predation possible. To understand T. rex, paleontologists must also understand the animals it bit, followed, scavenged, and avoided. Avoidance is important. An apex predator avoids more than we imagine. It avoids poor footing. It avoids overheating. It avoids fights it cannot win cheaply. It avoids healthy armored adults when better food exists. It avoids wasting energy on prey likely to escape. The ability to choose not to attack may be as important as the ability to attack. Survival often belongs to restraint. Restraint does not make the animal gentle. It makes it efficient. A T. rex that fed successfully for decades did so because it balanced risk and reward again and again. Hunger pushed it toward danger. Experience, instinct, and immediate sensory evidence shaped how far it went. This balance is the daily life of large predators, and it probably defined T. rex more than constant violence did. There may have been moments of immense stillness. An adult standing at dawn while mist rose from a channel. The head held high enough to sample air above low vegetation. A line of dew along the back. The tail suspended behind it. The animal listening not for music or meaning, but for movement. Every sense tied to survival. Every breath part of the ancient morning. The climate of the latest Cretaceous in western North America was not uniform across all regions, but Hell Creek is often reconstructed as a warm, well-watered lowland with river systems and coastal influence. The presence of crocodilian relatives, turtles, diverse plants, and floodplain sediments supports a landscape without severe freezing winters in the sampled areas. This does not mean constant tropical paradise. It means a dynamic, productive environment capable of supporting large herbivores and their predators. Productivity is not the same as stability. Rivers migrate. Storms flatten vegetation. Droughts occur. Fire can move through plant communities. Sea level changes alter drainage. Volcanic ash from distant eruptions may settle in thin layers. The late Cretaceous world was alive with disturbance. T. rex succeeded not in a static Eden, but in a shifting system where flexibility mattered. After a flood, the floodplain would smell different. Fresh sediment covered old trails. Fish might be stranded in shrinking pools. Carcasses might be lodged against trees. Nests could be destroyed. Herbivores would return cautiously to new banks and change channels. For a T. rex, the flood was danger during its height and opportunity after its retreat. The same water that could drown could also deliver food. A young tyrannosaur after such a flood might find small bodies first. Fish, frogs, drowned mammals, young turtles, fragments of larger carcasses. It would feed quickly, alert for larger scavengers. Its future as an apex predator did not prevent it from living on scraps when scraps were available. A life is built from whatever keeps the body going. Adult feeding on carrion could bring T. rex into contact with many other animals. Crocodile relatives might take portions from water. Smaller theropods might dart in when the adult lifted its head. Mammals could feed at night. Insects and microbes worked continuously. The carcass community was layered by size, timing, access, and risk. T. rex dominated many carcasses when present, but it did not consume them alone in an empty world. This carcass economy helps explain why scavenging and hunting should not be treated as mutually exclusive identities. A large predator may hunt when conditions favor it, and scavenge when carrion is available. The strong smell of T. rex would be useful for both. Its jaws would be useful for both. Its size would help it displace competitors in both contexts. The animal's ecology was broader than a single label. Sometimes a scent trail may have led not to a meal, but to another tyrannosaur. The smell of a rival on vegetation, the odor of a carcass already claimed, the trace of a possible mate, or the presence of a younger animal nearby could all change behavior. Chemical information is central in many living animals. T. Rex almost certainly lived in a world marked by scent, even if those marks are invisible to fossils. We do not know whether T. rex defended territories in the way some mammals do, or whether ranges overlapped more loosely. We do not know whether males and females behaved differently outside reproduction. We do not know how often adults tolerated juveniles. These unknowns are not failures. They are honest boundaries. The evidence is strong for anatomy and weaker for social structure. But even without firm answers, the questions help restore the animal. A T. rex was not always alone in the theatrical sense, standing on a ridge above the world. It was born from parents, encountered rivals, perhaps courted mates, may have interacted with young, and certainly shared its landscape with others of its kind. Its species existed as relationships among individuals, not as a single skeleton. The famous skeletons can make T. rex feel rare, but while it lived, it was part of a breeding population. There were juveniles somewhere, adults in their ranges, old individuals near the end of strength, and dead individuals entering the food web. A species is a moving pattern of births and deaths. Fossils freeze points in that pattern and leave us to reconstruct the motion. One old adult might avoid direct hunts more often, relying on carcasses, weaker prey, and experience. Another, still strong, might control access to productive ground. A young adult might take greater risks because it had not yet learned the costs, or because it was excluded from the best areas by older rivals. These are possibilities, not certainties, but they follow from the fact that age changes animals. Age also changes presence. A scarred old T. rex standing in shallow water would not look like the clean ideal of the species. It would look particular. One tooth broken short, one eye perhaps clouded or narrowed from old injury, skin marked by healed wounds, a gait not perfectly symmetrical. The legend says T. rex, the living animal says this one. Individual variation is important in paleontology. Some specimens are more robust, some are more gracile. Some differences reflect age. Some may reflect sex, though this is hard to demonstrate. Some reflect individual variation, pathology, or preservation. A species is not a single average. When scientists estimate size, growth, or strength, they must account for the spread of real bodies. This is also why claims about the largest T. rex can change. New specimens are discovered. Old specimens are remeasured. Mass estimates depend on methods, including scaling from limb bones, volumetric models, and comparisons with related animals. A few individuals, such as Sue and Scotty, have played major roles in discussions of maximum size. But the exact ranking matters less than the larger point. The biggest adults were among the most massive terrestrial predators known. Even an average adult would have been overwhelming at close range. The height of the hips, the length of the skull, the depth of the chest, the width across the back, the thickness of the tailbase, all of it would make the animal feel less like a movie creature and more like moving architecture. A human observer would not need exaggeration. Scale alone would be enough. But humans were not there. This is a simple point, yet it protects the reconstruction from becoming fantasy. No person watched a living rex. No human fear shaped its behavior. Its world was complete without us. When we imagine standing there, we are only a tool for scale. The animal's real relationships were with Cretaceous bodies, plants, weather, and ground. Remove the human observer, and the scene becomes better. The riverbank exists for itself. A turtle slips into water. A hadrosaur lifts it. Insects move in the light. A tyrannosaur crosses between trees and does not know it will become famous. It has no audience. It has only the next breath, the next scent, the next decision. That is the life worth reconstructing. Not the chase alone, but the animal before and after it. The juvenile hiding in wet cover. The subadult testing it, the adult feeding until bone cracks. The injured individual resting in shade. The old predator moving more slowly along a familiar river. These lives together make the species more than an emblem. The science will continue to revise the details. New fossils may clarify hatchlings, juveniles, skin, growth, or population structure. Better models may refine locomotion. New bite mark studies may separate hunting from scavenging in particular cases. CT scans may reveal more about senses. Isotope work may sharpen habitat use. The T-Rex of the future will not be identical to the T-Rex of today. That does not mean the animal is unknowable. It means knowledge is alive. The broad outline is strong. A giant late Cretaceous tyrannosaurid from western North America, deeply adapted for powerful biting, with strong senses, complex growth, and a top predatory role in ecosystems such as Hell Creek. Around that outline, details sharpen, shift, and sometimes change direction as evidence improves. There is beauty in that kind of uncertainty. It keeps the fossil from becoming a closed object. A tooth can still ask a question. A skull can still be scanned in a new way. A bone collected decades ago can answer something no one knew to ask when it was found. The animal is dead, but the investigation is not. In a drawer, a small fragment may wait under a catalog number. It might be a piece of tyrannosaur bone, a prey bone with a mark, or a plant fossil from the same layer. It may not draw crowds, it may never appear on a poster, but it can alter a reconstruction. The life of T-Rex depends on such fragments as much as on the towering mounts. The public meets T-Rex through spectacle, but science meets it through accumulation. Measurements, comparisons, photographs, thin sections, sediment logs, locality data, preparation notes, and careful arguments. The result can still be cinematic, but the cinema comes from reality. A floodplain at the end of the Cretaceous does not need invented drama. It already has enough. Enough hunger, enough injury, enough teeth and bone, enough floodwater and darkness, enough young animals that did not survive, enough old animals carrying pain, enough sudden death and slow burial, enough planetary violence waiting beyond the horizon. The restraint is not to make the story smaller, it is to let the real scale appear. Without Tyrannosaurus rex stands at that scale. One animal, one species, one predator in one interval of Earth history, and yet through it we can see growth, evolution, ecology, extinction, and the limits of evidence. Its skull is famous because it is spectacular. It remains important because it is informative. The teeth are frightening because they are large. They are more interesting because they are functional. At the end of the investigation, we return again to physical things: the tooth, the skull, the healed wound, the track, the layer of mudstone, the fossil leaf, the river sand. These are not decorations around the story, they are the story's foundation. Without them, T-Rex is only an. With them, it becomes an animal again. The final piece is the passage from living body to scientific object. In life, T-Rex was soft tissue arranged around bone. In death, bone became the part most likely to remain. But even bone is not permanent unless conditions intervene. It can be gnawed, split, dissolved, carried away, or crushed before. The fossils we study are not simply dead animals. They are dead animals that passed through a long sequence of unlikely filters. A complete skeleton is rare because bodies come apart. Tendons loosen. Ligaments decay. Water moves bones by size and shape. Small bones vanish more easily than large ones. Teeth detach. Skulls fall apart along sutures or are crushed by sediment. Even after burial, pressure can distort the skeleton. Minerals can fill spaces, replace original material, or leave bones heavy and stone-like. By the time a fossil reaches a museum, it has already been edited by geology. This editing affects how T. rex is understood. If juvenile bones preserve poorly, young animals may seem rarer than they were. If teeth preserve more easily than skeletons, predators may seem more common in some deposits than body fossils suggest. If rivers concentrate bones from different places, a quarry may mix lives that never met. Paleontologists account for these biases, but they can never remove them entirely. That is why context is precious. The exact layer, the surrounding sediment, the position of bones, the presence of plant material, the orientation of a skeleton, and the association with other fossils all matter. Removing a fossil without context is like tearing a page from a book and keeping only one word. The word may be important, but the sentence is gone. In the field, a tyrannosaur bone may first appear as a dark curve against pale sediment. The excitement must be slowed into procedure. The surface is mapped. Loose material is brushed away. Glue may stabilize cracks. Rock is removed carefully around the specimen. The bone is jacketed, lifted, transported, and prepared. A giant predator returns to science through slow hand movements, not through drama. There is something fitting about that. The animal that once broke bone must be handled as something fragile. A tooth that could puncture a pelvis can be damaged by a careless tool. A skull that endured the stress of feeding can crack if unsupported. The fossil has crossed deep time, but the final centimeters between rock and air are dangerous. Preparation can take years. The rock around a skull may be harder than expected. Bones may be crushed, overlapped, or incomplete. Some pieces are visible only after scanning. Missing regions may require comparison with other specimens. The work is part anatomy, part geology, part conservation. It is also an act of restraint, because removing too much or guessing too freely can destroy information. Once prepared, the fossil can be asked questions the field crew could not answer. How old was the animal? Did the bones show disease? Were growth plates fused? How did the skull compare with other specimens? Did the teeth bear wear from bone contact? Were there bite marks from another tyrannosaur? Does the sediment suggest burial in a channel, floodplain pond, or overbank deposit? Each answer adds a small piece to the life. Modern technology has widened those questions. CT scanning can reveal internal spaces without cutting the fossil. Digital models can test stress and motion. Microscopy can examine bone tissue. Geochemical methods can study aspects of environment and preservation. Databases can compare many specimens across formations. The old image of paleontology as only digging bones from rock misses how much of the animal is now studied after excavation. Yet technology does not remove interpretation. A model depends on assumptions about soft tissue, muscle size, cartilage, posture, and behavior. A scan reveals structure, but scientists must decide what it means. A growth line suggests time, but biology can vary with stress. The best work combines new tools with humility. T-Rex is too important and too often simplified to treat any single method as a final voice. The result of all this work is an animal that becomes clearer and stranger at the same time. Clearer in the bones, clearer in the bite, clearer in the growth. Stranger because every answer restores complexity. T-Rex was not merely large. It was a changing organism in a changing ecosystem, preserved unevenly and interpreted through evidence that must be handled with care. Extinction adds the last distortion. Because T-Rex died out with the rest of the non-avian dinosaurs, it has no direct living population to correct our reconstructions. No one can watch it feed, raise young, or move through forest. There is no living tyrannosaur in a reserve, no recorded call, no measured metabolism, no observed social behavior. Every claim must pass through stone. Stone is limited, but it is not mute. It says that the animal existed. It says that the teeth were real. It says that wounds healed. It says that bone was crushed. It says that rivers buried bodies. It says that the last Cretaceous world was full of life. The voice is quiet, but it is steady. In that quiet evidence, the ultimate predator becomes less like a question of strength and more like a question of belonging. What kind of world could produce such an animal? What prey could sustain it? What growth could build it? What senses could guide it? What catastrophe could remove it? The answer is not one fact. It is the entire Late Cretaceous floodplain compressed into teeth and bone. A T-Rex skeleton in a hall can make people feel small, but the deeper scale is not only physical. The deeper scale is time. The animal lived closer to the extinction boundary than to the first dinosaurs, yet even that closeness is millions of years. Its species may have lasted longer than human civilization by hundreds of times. Its world was brief geologically and vast biologically. Both can be true. When a child stands below the skull and looks up, they are seeing an animal that no human eye ever saw alive. They are also seeing the result of fieldwork, preparation, comparative anatomy, sedimentology, biomechanics, and generations of debate. Wonder and evidence meet in the same bones. The mouth draws attention first, but the deeper story is carried by everything around it. That story is why T-Rex remains central even after so much attention. Some famous animals become scientifically thin because they are known mostly through image. T-Rex is different. Its fame rests on fossils that continue to produce data. It is culturally enormous, but it is also scientifically rich. The challenge is to let the research discipline the image without draining away the awe. The awe survives. It survives in the serrated edge of a tooth. It survives in a healed wound on prey bone. It survives in a skull wide enough to hold immense muscles and sensitive passages. It survives in the thought of a hatchling no one has yet found, small and vulnerable in a world ruled by bodies larger than houses. It survives because the real animal does not need embellishment. The animal also forces a larger comparison with the rest of the dinosaur age. Sauropods had pushed herbivore size to heights no predator could match. Ceratopsians turned skulls into shields, horns, and social signals. Hadrosaurs became abundant plant processing machines. Ankylosaurs covered themselves in armor. Against this late Cretaceous abundance, T-Rex evolved not as a general symbol of all dinosaurs, but as a response to a particular world of large prey, open and forested ground, and carcasses worth fighting over. Its success was therefore ecological, not theatrical. A predator is only as successful as the landscape that feeds it. T-Rex required herbivore populations large enough to support rare but enormous carnivores. It required nesting success across generations. It required young animals surviving long enough to replace adults. It required rivers, plants, prey, and climate to remain within workable limits. For a time, those conditions held. The fossil record cannot tell us how a T-Rex felt hunger, pain, fear, or aggression. Those words belong to living nervous systems, and we should use them cautiously. But it can tell us that the animal had a nervous system capable of sensing and responding, a body capable of injury, and a life structured by needs. When we speak of hunger, we are not inventing drama. We are naming the biological demand that moves every predator. This brings the animal close without making it human. It did not think in stories. It did not know it was rare in the future. It did not know its bones might stand in halls. It knew the world through the means its body gave it. Scent, sight, sound, pressure, balance, pain, fullness, fatigue, contact. Those were enough to guide a life. Perhaps that is why the tooth is such a good beginning and ending. A tooth is simple, almost blunt in its meaning. It has no expression. It does not ask to be admired. But it is a direct piece of function. It grew in a jaw, met food, endured force, and fell away. In its enamel, the legend is reduced to biology. Hold that tooth against the image of the animal and the scale returns. Not the exaggerated scale of myth, but the scale of a real Cretaceous body. The tooth needs a jaw. The jaw needs a skull. The skull needs a neck, lungs, legs, prey, plants, water, and time. One fossil fragment opens outward until it contains a whole vanished plain. That is what Tyrannosaurus rex gives us when it is treated carefully. Not just fear, not just size, a complete ancient presence, assembled from pieces that survived when almost everything else was lost. And because the evidence is physical, the animal can always be returned to the ground it came from, not literally to the exact riverbank, because that river is gone, but to the kind of place that made it possible: wet sediment, shifting channels, broad leaves, conifers, carcasses, tracks, and the slow burial of bone. T. rex is not only a skeleton in human culture, it is a Hell Creek animal, tied to a particular geography of stone. Seen that way, its life becomes less like a single roar and more like a long passage through a changing floodplain. It begins small, it grows dangerous, it becomes dominant, it is wounded, it feeds, it ages, it disappears. Then, much later, the ground gives back enough of it for us to understand why the name still carries weight. The skull also invites a quieter question. What did the world look like from that height? An adult T-Rex did not see the floodplain from the eye level of its prey. It looked over shrubs, young trees, and the backs of many animals around it. Its view was broken by trunks and leaves, but elevated enough to catch movement across open stretches. A herd turning near water, a carcass exposed on a sandbar, the dark shape of another tyrannosaur beyond a channel, all could enter its field of awareness before smaller animals noticed the same things. Height, however, is not the same as safety. Tall animals are visible. A T-Rex could not vanish easily once it stepped into open ground. Prey could detect it, rivals could see it, and smaller scavengers could track its movement toward food. The animal's size was a weapon and a signal at the same time. It announced danger, but it also announced presence. Much of its life may have involved choosing when to be exposed and when to move within cover. The tail helped make that exposure manageable. In old drawings, tyrannosaurs dragged their tails like oversized lizards, leaving an impossible posture that would have made efficient movement difficult. Modern reconstructions lift the tail behind the body, balancing the torso and head. This shift is more than artistic. It changes the animal's whole silhouette. T. rex becomes a horizontal, dynamic biped, not a tripod. The lifted tail tells us the animal was active in a way earlier museum poses failed to capture. The hips and thighs were central to that activity. The femur, tibia, metatarsals, and tail musculature formed a powerful locomotor system. Muscle scars on bone show where soft tissues once attached. The caudofemoral muscles, running from tail to thigh, would have helped pull the hind limb backward during locomotion. This is a deeply dinosaurian and reptilian arrangement, modified in different ways across theropods. In T-Rex, it supported a body that had to move efficiently despite extraordinary mass. There is a temptation to turn every anatomical fact into a superpower. Strong legs become impossible speed. Strong jaws become constant killing. Strong smell becomes supernatural tracking. The better reconstruction is more restrained. Each trait improved performance within limits. T-Rex could move well for its size, bite with unusual force, and sense its environment effectively. Those abilities are impressive because they are biological, not because they break biology. A living animal is always negotiating with its own body. The head that made T-Rex dangerous also had to be carried all day. The mass that protected it also required food. The bite that opened bone also risked damage. The size that intimidated rivals also made concealment harder. Evolution does not grant advantages without costs. The life of T-Rex was the management of those costs. This is what separates the animal from the monster. A monster can be only appetite. An animal must also be recovery, hesitation, misjudgment, and rest. It must wait through heat, respond to pain, avoid needless danger, and live through long intervals when nothing spectacular happens. The Cretaceous did not exist as a sequence of attacks. It existed as weather, digestion, growth, sleep, and movement, interrupted sometimes by violence. And when violence did come, it came from bodies built by the same world. Horn against jaw, tail against leg, tooth against bone, mud against foot, infection against tissue. The ultimate predator did not stand outside the floodplain's rules. It was one of the strongest expressions of those rules, and when the rules changed at the end of the Cretaceous, even that strength was not enough. One individual might begin near a nest, hidden in vegetation, survive as a small hunter along stream margins, grow into a slender adolescent chasing quick prey, become a heavy adult feeding on carcasses and large herbivores, suffer a bite to the face, lose teeth, heal a rib, limp through one season, recover in the next, and die near water when a flood covered part of its skeleton. Another might never survive its first month. The life of the ultimate predator was not a single path. Some died in drought. Some died in fights. Some starved after injury. Some were killed as young animals by the very ecosystem they might have ruled later. Some became old, their bones thickened, their teeth worn and replaced, their bodies carrying the accumulated record of years. The average life of a T-Rex was probably much shorter than the maximum life suggested by the oldest known individuals. Growth studies have suggested that T-Rex reached adult size in roughly 2 decades under older estimates, with recent work continuing to refine how flexible and prolonged growth may have been. The exact timeline can shift with new specimens and methods, but the broad point remains: T-Rex grew from a small hatchling into a multi-ton predator within a single lifetime. That transformation required intense feeding and survival through multiple ecological roles. An animal in its prime would be difficult to challenge. Its senses were mature. Its skull had reached full force. Its body mass protected it from most predators. It had likely learned the roots of herbivores, the smell of floodplain decay, the safest crossings, the places where carcasses snagged, and the signals of rival tyrannosaurs. Experience is rarely preserved directly, but it matters in living predators. A large old carnivore knows its range in ways a young one does not. A prime adult moving through dense growth would not hurry without reason. The head might swing slightly as it sampled air. The feet would place carefully on uneven ground. The tail would balance each adjustment. When it stopped, smaller sounds would return slowly: insects, water, distant calls. Its stillness could be more dangerous than motion, because stillness might mean listening. Then a sound comes from the riverbank. Not panic yet, just movement. A hadrosaur has shifted in mud. Another answers, a branch breaks. The tyrannosaur turns toward it. What happens next could be nothing. It could be investigation. It could be a missed attempt. Or it could become the kind of event that leaves a tooth embedded in bone and a healed injury for scientists to find 66 million years later. We often imagine the kill, but the aftermath mattered just as much. Blood on mud, trampled plants, the smell of opened body cavities, smaller scavengers waiting in the trees or brush, crocodile relatives approaching from water, insects arriving quickly. A T-Rex feeding until the easy tissue was gone, then using its jaws to break into deeper structures. The carcass would become an ecosystem of its own. Days later, only scattered remains might be left. A femur dragged from the body, ribs broken, vertebrae separated, teeth shed around the site, footprints overlapping in mud. Rain would soften everything. A flood might lift bones, carry them, bury them, or destroy them. If the conditions aligned, the feeding site could become a fossil site. If not, it would vanish completely, which is what happened almost every time. This is why paleontologists do not read fossils as simple illustrations. They read them as evidence shaped by death, decay, transport, burial, chemistry, erosion, and collection. A T-Rex tooth near a hadrosaur bone does not automatically prove a hunt. A bite mark does not always reveal whether the prey was alive. A healed wound changes the interpretation. Context matters. Sediment matters. The shape of damage matters. The best reconstructions are built slowly. A skull scanned with CT imaging reveals internal passages. A thin section of bone shows growth. A tooth mark compared with dental anatomy shows feeding behavior. A limb bone modeled under stress suggests limits of movement. A fossil leaf helps rebuild climate. A pollen grain can change the plant community. The life of T-Rex emerges not from one spectacular skeleton, but from many kinds of evidence placed together. Hell Creek is famous because it preserves more than dinosaurs. It preserves an ecosystem. Fish scales, turtle shells, crocodile bones, mammal teeth, leaves, seeds, pollen, amber, and sedimentary structures all contribute. Without them, T-Rex would float in imagination. With them, it stands in a specific world, a coastal plain with rivers, forests, wetlands, seasons, storms, and a community of organisms living at the end of the Cretaceous. Small mammals moved under the feet of dinosaurs. Some were insect eaters. Some may have fed on plants, seeds, or small animals. They were not yet the dominant large animals of the land, but they were diverse and persistent. At night, while a T-Rex rested or moved through darkness, mammals may have searched leaf litter, climbed vegetation, or entered burrows. They lived in the margins, and the margins would matter after the asteroid. Birds were there too. Not birds as symbols of a future world, but living Cretaceous animals with feathers, wings, beaks, or teeth depending on the lineage, and their own ecological roles. Some moved through trees. Some flew over water. Some fed near shorelines or rivers. To a T-Rex, they were part of the sensory background, movement overhead, calls in vegetation, small bodies that might scatter when the ground shook. Pterosaurs still crossed the skies, though their diversity had changed from earlier periods. Crocodile relatives occupied waterways. Champsosaurs, turtles, fish, salamanders, frogs, and lizards filled aquatic and nearshore habitats. The world was not waiting for mammals to become important. It was already complete, dense with lineages that had histories of their own. T-Rex was a top predator in a world crowded with other success stories. Plants anchored everything. Without plant growth, there were no herds of herbivores. Without herbivores, there was no T-Rex. The leaves preserved in Hell Creek rocks show flowering plants, conifers, ferns, and other vegetation-forming communities unlike any single modern forest. Some grew in wet lowlands, some on better drained ground. The distribution of plants shaped the movement of prey, and the movement of prey shaped the life of the predator. A triceratops feeding in low vegetation is converting sunlight into flesh, horn, and bone. An Edmontosaurus browsing near a channel is doing the same. T-Rex arrives later in the chain, dependent on energy captured by leaves. Even the ultimate predator is, in this sense, built by plants. Its jaws are powered by Cretaceous sunlight, stored first in green tissue, then in herbivore bodies, then in the muscle of the hunter. That connection makes the animal less like a monster and more like an ecosystem concentrated into one body. The skull carries riverbank plants inside it, indirectly, through food. The legs carry floodplain distances. The teeth carry the hardness of prey skeletons. The senses carry the complexity of forests and wind. A T-Rex is not separate from Hell Creek. It is one of the ways Hell Creek moved. As the seasons turned, the floodplain changed around it. There may have been wet and dry periods, though not winters like those of high-latitude modern continents. Rain could make the ground slick and rivers dangerous. Dry intervals could harden mud and concentrate animals near water. Plants flushed new growth. Insects emerged in waves. Carcasses decayed faster in warmth. Every season changed the balance of opportunity and risk. A large adult in a dry interval might follow a river because everything else must follow it too. The banks hold tracks. The water carries scent. Herbivores arrive at predictable places to drink. Crocodile relatives wait in the shallows. A predator approaching from downwind may pause among trees and let the herd reveal its weakest edge. The scene is not a chase yet. It is a calculation without words. During wetter times, the same animal might move along higher levees, avoiding deep mud that could waste energy or risk injury. Heavy bodies are vulnerable to bad footing. A slip on a bank could strain muscle or break bone. The fossil record preserves enough injuries to remind us that large dinosaurs were not immune to accidents. An apex predator still had to place its feet well. The question of whether T-Rex hunted in groups remains unresolved. Some Tyrannosaur sites and trackways from related animals have been interpreted as possible evidence for social behavior, but direct proof for coordinated pack hunting in T-Rex is lacking. It is possible that individuals gathered around carcasses tolerated each other at times or moved together under certain conditions. Coordinated hunting like wolves is a much stronger claim and should not be assumed. Living predators show a wide range of social arrangements. Some are solitary. Some form loose associations. Some gather at food. Some cooperate. Some tolerate kin but fight strangers. T-Rex could have had behavior that does not fit neatly into a modern category. The bones tell us individuals encountered each other, sometimes violently. They do not yet tell us the full rules of those encounters. A pair of tyrannosaurs on a floodplain would change the emotional shape of the landscape, but not every pairing would mean teamwork. It could be courtship, it could be rivalry, it could be a parent and older young if such associations occurred. It could be two animals drawn separately to the same carcass. The scene may look social to us while being tense, temporary, and practical to them. The subject of intelligence also needs restraint. T-Rex had a relatively developed brain for a large non-avian dinosaur, with sensory regions that suggest strong smell and complex processing. It was likely a capable, responsive animal. But intelligence should not be measured only by whether it resembles mammals or birds in familiar ways. A tyrannosaur needed the intelligence required by its life, locating food, navigating a range, recognizing danger, interacting with others, and adjusting behavior to changing conditions. Modern birds remind us that dinosaurs could be behaviorally complex. Corvids solve problems. Raptors learn landscapes. Ostriches and cassowaries use powerful bodies with alert senses. Crocodilians show parental care, communication, and learning. T-Rex was not a bird in behavior simply because birds are its distant relatives, and it was not a crocodile either. But living archosaurs show that reptile grade should never mean simple. A large predator's brain is often tuned to consequence. Wasting energy has consequence. Misjudging prey has consequence. Approaching a rival has consequence. T-Rex did not need abstract thought to be effective. It needed perception linked to action, memory linked to place, and enough behavioral flexibility to survive in an ecosystem where every day presented different arrangements of food, risk, heat, and competition. The arms, the skull, the legs, and the senses all belong to this same functional picture. Small arms did not make T-Rex clumsy. The animal's balance did not depend on using the forelimbs like props. Its head was not too heavy to manage. Its teeth were not too large for feeding. These features can look exaggerated in isolation, but in the whole skeleton they form a coherent predator adapted to a specific range of tasks. Even the tiny-looking arms are only tiny by comparison with the rest of the animal. On their own, they belonged to a powerful structure with large claws and strong muscles. But they were carried high and close to the chest, unable to perform many actions that longer theropod arms could. Evolution had shifted the killing and feeding system forward into the skull. Rex did with its head what many predators do with head and hands together. The skull's surface may also have been sensitive. Some research on tyrannosaur facial bones suggests rich nerve supply in parts of the snout, perhaps making the face useful for detecting contact, manipulating food, or interacting with other tyrannosaurs. Similar ideas have been discussed for other theropods. The exact soft tissues are gone, but the foramina in bone, small openings for nerves and blood vessels, hint that the face was not a numb battering ram. That sensitivity would matter when biting. A predator needs force, but it also needs feedback. It must know where its teeth are, how prey is moving, whether bone is resisting, whether a grip is slipping. The jaws of Rex were capable of tremendous power, but power without control breaks the predator as well as the prey. The skull had to sense, adjust, and endure. When the jaws closed, the body followed. Neck muscles pulled, hind limbs braced, the tail balanced, the feet dug into ground. A feeding Rex might plant one foot on a carcass or use body weight and head movement to tear away tissue. It could shake, pull, twist, and reposition. The violence was not random. It was mechanical, anatomical, and efficient. Feeding could leave distinctive marks, deep punctures where teeth entered bone, parallel scores where teeth scraped along surfaces, crushed areas where force exceeded the bone's resistance, missing sections where pieces were broken away. These marks are the closest the fossil record comes to preserving motion. They are not the animal itself, but they show where living force met another body. A carcass did not remain clean for long. Bacteria bloomed, gases built, skin split. Insects opened small entrances, scavengers enlarged them. Heat accelerated everything. Rex may have fed on fresh kills, old carcasses, and remains in between. Its strong stomach acids, like those of many carnivores, likely handled bacteria and bone fragments. Feeding was messy because life is messy after death. This mess is part of the animal's reality. Popular culture often keeps T-Rex in the clean instant before contact, mouth open, teeth bright. The real mouth would have held broken tissue, blood, fragments of plant matter from herbivore guts, bacteria, shed tooth material, and the smell of decay. A predator is not polished. It is a living system for turning other bodies into survival. After feeding, rest would follow. Digestion takes time. A large meal changes movement and behavior. The animal might withdraw to shade, stand near water, or lie down with the belly heavy. Smaller scavengers could return to the carcass. Crocodile relatives might pull pieces into the river. Insects would continue their work. The tyrannosaur would carry the meal inward, rebuilding muscle, replacing energy, sustaining heat, and growing if it was still young. A successful predator leaves behind absence. A missing juvenile from a herd. A carcass reduced. A trackway interrupted. But it also leaves behind life, because predators shape prey behavior and prey populations, which shape plants, which shape landscapes. Rex was part of that pressure. Its presence influenced where herbivores fed, how they moved, when they gathered, and how risk spread across the floodplain. The idea of an apex predator can sound like a crown, but ecology is not a monarchy. Rex did not rule the land in any human sense. It participated in a network of energy, danger, and opportunity. It was affected by drought, disease, injury, prey numbers, competition, and environmental change. Its dominance was real, but it was biological dominance, not control. The floodplain did not obey it. That distinction matters because the animal becomes more impressive when it is not made invincible. A T-Rex that can fail is more real than one that cannot. A T-Rex that must choose prey, avoid injury, heal from wounds, and survive bad seasons is more interesting than a monster that wins, because the story requires it. The fossil record supports strength, but it also supports vulnerability. One of the deepest vulnerabilities was time. T-Rex lived at the end. The ecosystems that supported it had no knowledge of the asteroid already on its way, no sense of a boundary approaching in the geological record. A nesting dinosaur did not know that its lineage's world would soon be transformed. A tyrannosaur following sent through trees did not know it belonged to the last non-avian dinosaurs. The final days before the impact were not necessarily strange. Rivers flowed, leaves grew, eggs hatched, predators hunted, turtles basked, insects moved through litter, triceratops fed under warm skies, T-Rex crossed mud, shed teeth, and left tracks that may or may not have been preserved. Catastrophe often arrives in worlds that are still working. Somewhere in those last landscapes, a T-Rex lowered its head to drink. Water touched the lower jaw. Its nostrils stayed above the surface. Reflections broke around the skull. Behind it, the tail balanced the body on the bank. Around it, the floodplain continued in ordinary motion, carrying no visible sign that the age of giant dinosaurs was close to ending. The asteroid impact at Chicxulub changed everything on a planetary scale. Fire, dust, darkness, acid rain, collapsing food webs, and climate disruption followed in ways that are still studied and debated in detail. Non-avian dinosaurs disappeared. Birds survived. Crocodilians survived. Turtles, mammals, amphibians, fish, insects, and plants survived unevenly. T-Rex did not. Its body plan, so successful in the last Cretaceous floodplains, could not pass through that boundary. The extinction does not make T-Rex a failure. Extinction is not always a verdict on adaptation. The animal was suited to a world that was violently interrupted. Its prey base collapsed. Its food chains broke. Its size, energy needs, and reproductive biology may have become liabilities in the aftermath. The same traits that made it dominant under one set of conditions could not save it under another. No T-Rex watched the age end as a concept. Individuals experienced hunger, darkness, cold, fire, stress, and scarcity if they lived long enough after the impact to experience them at all. Species vanish through individual deaths. The end of T-Rex would have been made of bodies failing one by one, nests not producing surviving young, territories emptying, calls no longer answered, carcasses not replaced by living populations. Then, the bones entered the ground. Some were buried in river sediment. Some weathered away. Some were broken before burial. Some dissolved. Some turned slowly into fossils as minerals moved through pores and replaced or filled what remained. Above them, the Paleogene world changed. Mammals diversified. Forests returned in altered form. Rivers shifted. Mountains rose and eroded. The western interior seaway disappeared. Time moved over the skeletons without knowing their names. Millions of years later, erosion opened the rocks. A piece of bone appeared on a slope. A tooth weathered free. A skull, still locked in sandstone, began to meet daylight again. Field crews walked the Badlands, scanning the ground for texture and color that did not belong to ordinary stone. A fossil discovery often begins with noticing a small difference: enamel shine, bone grain, a curve where the rock should be flat. The first visible fragment may be unimpressive to anyone else. A brown edge, a rough surface, a piece of tooth, but to a trained eye, it can mean an animal. More digging reveals whether the fragment is isolated or part of a skeleton. The excitement must be controlled because fossils are fragile, and because the ground does not care how famous the animal might be. A T-Rex must still be excavated centimeter by centimeter. Once collected, the fossil enters another life. It is jacketed in plaster, transported, catalogued, prepared, studied, scanned, measured, and sometimes displayed. Rock is removed under microscopes. Cracks are stabilized. Missing pieces are identified. Labels are written. A bone that spent 66 million years underground may then spend a century in a drawer, a lab, or a museum hall, still producing new information as methods improve. This is why T-Rex keeps changing. The animal itself is gone, but science is not finished with it. New specimens alter size ranges. New methods refine growth. New debates reshape juvenile anatomy. New studies test bite mechanics, soft tissue possibilities, speed, sensory biology, and ecology. The public image may look fixed, but the scientific animal remains active, revised by evidence. A reconstruction made today is different from one made 100 years ago. The tail is lifted. The body is more horizontal. The animal is more bird-related in posture and biology, even if not bird-like in every detail. The skin is debated with more nuance. The lips question is discussed. The speed is restrained. The arms are not punchlines alone. The skull is understood as both weapon and sensory structure. The monster has become an animal, and the animal is more compelling. The ultimate predator is not diminished by accuracy. It becomes larger in a different way. Not larger in meters or tons, but larger in reality. A T-Rex that lived among rivers, plants, prey, rivals, parasites, storms, injuries, and seasons is more extraordinary than a creature that exists only to roar. The evidence gives it weight no fiction can provide. Think again of the tooth in sandstone. It may have fallen during feeding. It may have been shed while the animal walked. It may have washed from one place to another before burial. It cannot tell us which individual carried it, whether that animal was male or female, young or old, healthy or injured. But it can tell us the shape of force. It can tell us that somewhere, a jaw closed hard enough for such a tooth to matter. If the tooth came from an adult, it was part of a mouth that could change the fate of a multi-ton herbivore. If it came from a younger animal, it belonged to a life still becoming. Either way, it was not made for symbolism. It was made for feeding. Its serrations were not decorations. Its thickness was not exaggeration. Its root held it in a skull that carried the demands of survival. The same rock that holds the tooth may hold leaves. It may hold turtle shell. It may hold fish scales, crocodile teeth, fragments of wood, or the pollen of plants that fed the herbivores that fed the predator. A fossil bed is a compressed ecosystem. T-Rex may draw the eye, but around it are the quieter remains that made its life possible. A full life of T-Rex would move through all of these layers. Eggshell and nest, if we could find them. Juvenile bones, rare and debated. Subadult growth, written in tissue. Adult skulls, scarred and massive. Teeth in prey bones. Tracks in mud. Shed crowns near carcasses. Bite marks on Triceratops and Edmontosaurus. Pathologies in ribs and jaws. Finally, burial in the same floodplain that sustained it. To call it the ultimate predator is not to say it was the only great predator. The Mesozoic held many. Allosaurus in the Jurassic. Giganotosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus in the Cretaceous. Spinosaurus along river systems. Mosasaurs in the seas. Raptors in smaller roles. Crocodile relatives in water. But T-Rex represents a particular extreme, the deep-headed, bone-crushing land predator perfected near the end of the dinosaur age. Its success depended on more than size. Size alone can become a burden. The body must feed itself. The limbs must support it. The senses must guide it. The jaws must justify the calories required to grow them. The young must survive long enough to replace the old. The species must find enough territory and prey across changing landscapes. T-Rex met those requirements for a meaningful span of time. In that sense, the animal's life was a negotiation with limits. The limit of how fast a huge biped can move. The limit of how much force teeth can withstand. The limit of how much food a floodplain can provide. The limit of how much injury a predator can survive. The limit of how quickly a young animal can grow without starving. Evolution pushed T-Rex toward the edge of those limits, but did not remove them. There is humility in that. The most famous predator in prehistory was still bounded by mud, weather, hunger, and chance. It still had to lower its head to drink. It still had to rest. It still had to heal. It still began inside an egg. It still disappeared when the world changed beyond what its lineage could endure. A modern bird on a fence post is not T-Rex, but it is a living dinosaur. Its bones, lungs, feathers, eggs, and ancestry carry the survival of one dinosaur branch beyond the catastrophe that ended the tyrant. When a bird tilts its head and watches movement with quick attention, it offers a distant reminder that the dinosaur story did not simply stop. It narrowed, passed through fire and darkness, and continued in another form. T-Rex has no living descendant in the direct sense of a surviving species line. Its branch ended. But it shares deep ancestry with the birds that survived, and through them the theropod experiment remains present in the modern world. The ultimate predator is gone, yet the broader lineage that made predatory dinosaurs possible is not entirely gone. It has changed size, shape, and role, but it still moves through air and across ground. The skeleton in a museum and the bird outside the building belong to the same vast story. One is an ending. One is a continuation. Between them lies the asteroid, the extinction, the rise of mammals, the spread of grasses, the arrival of humans, and the long work of erosion exposing stone. T-Rex sits at the boundary between fascination and evidence, between the lost world and the living one. Return one last time to the riverbank. The mud is damp. Leaves hang over the water. A herd has passed recently, leaving churned tracks and broken stems. Far away, thunder moves over the coastal plain. Near the bank, a single tooth lies where it fell, pressed into sediment by rain and time. The animal that carried it has moved on, or died, or already become part of the ground. The tooth waits through burial. It waits through darkness. It waits as the river becomes rock, as the plain rises, as the climate changes, as the last dinosaurs vanish and new worlds gather above them. Then, wind opens the slope, grain by grain, and the tooth appears again under a modern sky. It is small enough to hold, but it carries the shape of an animal that once made every living thing around it listen. Tyrannosaurus rex was not a myth walking through a backdrop. It was a body in a place, a hatchling in cover, a juvenile in the undergrowth, a growing hunter on the floodplain, an adult with bone-crushing jaws and scarred skin, a survivor of seasons, a participant in a world of rivers, forests, prey, rivals, and storms. The ultimate predator was ultimate because it was real, and because the reality was enough. What remains is not the roar. It is the tooth, the skull, the healed bite, the footprint, the river mud turned to stone. It is the evidence of a life that belonged completely to the last Cretaceous world, and to no other.